Yeah, IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I hope y'all didn't miss us too much yesterday, but we both needed some time off yesterday to kind of recover our voices and a lot of other things, but we are back. We wouldn't make you go too long without us. Today, Ryan, it's a great time to introduce our midweek rundown show. We talked about this last week. We're going to kind of on Wednesdays during the off season just take a little bit of a different angle at things. And instead of just picking a topic, then really diving into that topic, what we're going to do is just kind of pick 3, 4, 5, just kind of hot topics, whatever they may be those particular days, and we'll dive into them. And today we have several different topics we want to discuss. We're going to talk about the Gerad Parker press conference and things that we heard from that, just our takeaways from it. We'll dive into kind of looking at Notre Dame's offensive line coaching search. We'll just update what we know, what we can say, and then just give an idea, really talk more so, Ryan, about why this is such an important hire and what Notre Dame needs to be looking for in a new O-line coach. We will dive into Notre Dame's very strange linebacker recruiting process right now with Al Golden. And then the last thing that we'll dive into, or actually the linebacker stuff will be last, but then the other recruiting topic we're going to discuss is I was finally able to finish up just all the breakdowns and evaluations I needed to do to re-rank and regrade the Notre Dame 2023 signees. So I have now released the offensive class, the defensive class. Ryan, there's a lot of changes on my board, and you and I have discussed a lot of them, and we have the current grades, the analysis of each player, the fit at Notre Dame isn't as part of each player's analysis, and then of course we will get into also the upside grade we'll have. So we'll dive into that. I'll talk about my rankings, how I got there, and Ryan will give a chance to kind of give his thoughts on those and his thoughts as well. So. And then at the end, we'll do a mailbag. So we are definitely going to still do a mailbag. We're just going to try to hit each topic a little bit quicker. You know, we won't spend like an hour on each topic like we normally do, because that would make for a very, very, very long show. And so we'll dive into each one a little bit less, and then we'll do a mailbag at the end. So you can go throw your mailbags in there, mailbag questions in there now, and we'll start starring them and putting them in there for mailbag time. So that's what our plan is today. However, before we begin, I do want to just ask y'all for a favor. No super chats today. If you want to give us a super chat today, instead, what I would prefer you do is click on that GoFundMe link in the browser or in the chat there. If you're watching via podcast, you'll see it. If you are listening via through podcast platform, not on the YouTube channel, then what we'll do is we'll put the link in the description of the show. And basically what's going on is Jaden Mickey, who is a current freshman rising, he'll be a sophomore next year for Notre Dame. His mom is battling stage 4 colon cancer. And so they need to raise some serious money to have the family have to relocate to Arizona, where a treatment facility is, for her to do a specialized type of treatment. And so what I'm asking is if you were going to give a super chat today, please throw that out there. Okay. And when and if we're going to super chat, I'm still going to ask you to give, right? And so the way I look at it is, Ryan, we get minimum 5,000 viewers per show, minimum, and sometimes we get a lot more than that. So if we just did 5,000, right, and everyone averaged just $5 of giving, we would raise over $25,000. They're already close to a third of the way towards their goal. We could really make a big difference if we can step up and help. So we've talked about wanting to do fundraisers, and somebody had said maybe do something for the show and raise money, but then we'd have to raise the money, and then we would get some taken out from us. Then we would have to pay them, and then that would get something taken out. So this is sort of us doing a fundraiser, but instead we would just ask that you give directly to the GoFundMe account that they've set up. And then also that helps you, because then you can kind of get your whatever you need for your taxes and things like that. So I would really, really appreciate it if everybody could kind of step up and help out if you can. Not everybody can, and I understand that. And some people can only give $5. Some people can only give $1. Some people can give more. And if you're whatever you're able to give, because everybody has their own situations that are different. We would really, really ask that you guys do that. So no super chat today. If you're someone who was going to give a super chat, we would ask that you put that super chat towards this GoFundMe for what we're seeing, what's going on with Mrs. Mickey. So I would really appreciate that. So definitely step up, IB Nation. We always do. Every time that we've tried to do something like this, it's always gone well. And I hope that y'all help out and step up again. So that's what I wanted to start off with today's show. Again, link is going to be in the chat right now. I've already put it in. If you're listening via podcast app, if you go back to sort of the description box of this particular show, we will have the link in there as well. So really appreciate y'all very much. So Ryan, let's dive into our main topic for today's show. And we're kind of a couple days late on this because Gerad Parker had his press conference on Monday. And what my frustration was, Ryan, a lot of what was said about him and what he said was kind of drowned out a little bit by the intro of the press conference. And as I've said on the board, I don't want to talk about it too much. I absolutely said what I needed to say. I stand by 100% the things that we reported. That, look, I understood why Marcus Freeman had to say what he had to say. We expected that. We knew he had to defend Jack. That's his boss. No one's asking him to throw Jack Swarbrick under the bus. I had issues with the ferocity with which he doubled down on that because we know who we've talked to. We know who our sources are. And we know the situation there. Once you get past that and you're able to focus on Gerad Parker, and this was my frustration, is Jack's email comes out the day that Notre Dame lets it out that Gerad Parker is going to be the OC, which takes away from Gerad Parker being named. Then the press conference to introduce him has that at the beginning. And it again takes away from what Gerad Parker's moment. So we've addressed it. We've addressed it on the message board. I flat out stand by what I said. No question about it. But it's time to move on. And the moving on refers to let's focusing on what Gerad Parker has to say. Because if you can eliminate the first 5 minutes of that press conference, this is a really good press conference. We heard from Coach Freeman about things he's looking for, but then we got a chance to listen to Coach Parker. And I got to say, it's just a press conference. Now we need to see what actions follow. But I thought he hit it out, and I thought he knocked it out of the park.
I mean, he did. I would say this, Brian. I felt really bad. I mean, kind of what you're talking about, right? But it was his moments, and he was a rock star in the interview, in my opinion, in the press conference, I should say. He presented himself very well. It makes sense why several people that we've talked to have, a couple guys that had coached at West Virginia had talked about that. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a head coach down the road, right? Because he kind of has that personality to him. And just a very eloquent speaker. First and foremost, it was really nice to just kind of hear his personality a little bit, but also hear I don't want to call it the organization, but just the formation of everything that he was presenting to the interview, from his experiences to his philosophy to how it all fits together. I really loved everything I heard, to be very honest. There wasn't too much that I could poke holes in that press conference to be nope, didn't hear that. I wanted to hear a little bit of that. He really came off as a person that is prepared for this, which is interesting because most people think that this is just one that's just came out of the blue. You missed on someone. Now you got to settle type of thing. Coach Parker's been working for this, man, and he's been ready. I think he said something when Coach Freeman comes to me ready to interview me, I have to be ready, right? It's dishonorable not to be ready for that type of opportunity. And I thought that kind of summed it up, man. This guy is a self-driven person that is ready for this. And I hope that he knocks it out of the park because, that press conference, I think, really spoke volumes to not only the person that he is, not only the football minded he is, but I really think that he is a hardworking guy. That's how he came off to me, that he's been preparing constantly, even while he's, as some people would say it like this, he's just the tight ends coach. Well, behind the scenes, Coach Parker's been preparing for this, right? He's been ready for when his time was called. His time is called. And I really hope he rises to the opportunity because I think that he has all the makings of doing a very good job at Notre Dame.
I thought some takeaways, Ryan, from the press conference that I really liked is he, look, again, these are words, right? We've got to see the actions to follow the words. So let's get that assumption out. I don't need to say this about everything that we're going to talk about. I thought one of the things that he hit on that I really liked and appreciated was he was when he was talking about his offensive philosophy. Look, you say the things you're supposed to. We're going to be inside out. We're gonna be run oriented, all those kind of things, and all that sounded great. But he really talked a lot about the emphasis on we are going to do things that our players can handle. And he said all the right words. Look, if it's too much from what they can do, then we got to scale back. We got to knock more in. if he lives by that, that's going to be huge for Notre Dame because it backs up what we've heard and what we've been told by people, Ryan, about how he is a details-oriented guy. He is more a technique. I'd rather them master technique with, this amount of volume than just be okay technique with lots of volume, right? And he at least in this press conference, said the things that I was hoping to hear. That was one of the first things that I wanted to hear from Gerad Parker in this press conference, Ryan, was that right there.
Yeah, and I think that having the supports around him is going to be very important, right? And knowing, I mean, we had talked about what he believes in a little bit just from conversations, from sources around that would be more in the know in that conversation, right? But I mean, it all sounds good on paper to your point, right? I mean, the actualizing it moving forward is going to be massive, obviously, for Gerad Parker in his first year. But I think that for me, it's the resources that are around him. Like I saw someone in the chat talk about Gino Guidugli and talking about, the offensive line coach that's going to come in. And it's not a one-person ship, right, offensively. It is going to be a collaborative effort. And every time I've heard Coach Parker talk, he comes off as a person that is not going to be afraid to take advantage of those resources, right? Like, why would I not use the mind of Gino Guidugli? Why would I not use the mind of whoever the new offensive line coach is going to be in here? Why would I not understand more about what the wide receiver strengths are from Coach Stuckey? Why would I not understand what the running backs are comfortable with from Coach McCullough? You have a really strong support staff around you. You have a strong offensive staff in general. So the ability for him to understand that, hey, man, I have a great opportunity in front of me, but I'm not alone. Right? Like, I'm not alone. This is a collaborative effort. I think that's a big thing. And I think that Coach Freeman and this staff is going to be well equipped to help him in all those assets that he needs early on, especially.
No, there's no question. And look, that's a big part of this because the challenge for this staff is going to be similar to what the challenge was for the staff last year, Ryan, which is it's a staff that's going to be new together. Like last year, I mean, look, okay, Tommy Reese, the OC, he has a role in bringing guys in, but he never coached with Dylan McCullough before. He'd never coached with Chancey Stuckey before. He'd never coached with Gerad Parker before, and he only coached with Harry Hiestand for 1 year. Now, he played under Harry Hiestand, but they only coached together for 1 year, and that was the year that Tommy was a GA. So it was a staff that had to learn each other. The benefit this year is there at least are going to be 3 coaches that have coached together, even if it's just for a year. But the fact is that this is a staff that is going to be new together, and it's going to be very important that they focus on that dynamic. To your point, now that means he has to be willing to listen to other people, but at the same time, he also has to lead. And he mentioned that at the beginning too, and he talked about like, look, it's my job to kind of bring this whole thing together. It's my job to make sure that we're all kind of coming together. He talked about how we have to hold people accountable, that coaches and players, he mentioned coaches and players, you have to hold them accountable. That's obviously a big part of this conversation. There's things that are going to be where, yes, we're going to talk, but when we leave this room, we got to all be on the same page and be moving forward. And everybody has their role in this. But at the end of the day, I'm putting the game plan together. I've got to make the decisions on what goes into it. We're all part of the process, but I've got to make the final decisions, and everybody's got to be on board. And so it can be a hard balance sometimes, Ryan, from having someone who says, okay, I'm the boss, but I need you guys to be a part of this process. That can be a challenge sometimes because some guys are like, no, hold on a second. I don't know if I really want to challenge him or push him because he may get ticked off. So he needs to make sure he's set an environment where the coaches really feel they can be free to speak and share their ideas and push back at times on things. But also it's then up to him to also show enough leadership to where they got to know, okay, you said what you need to say. This is what we're doing. Now let's move forward. So it can be a tough thing to do, honestly, especially when you're talking about in the world of coaching, Ryan, where the egos are big, to where I'm open enough and giving enough to listen, and I'm going to take some of your ideas, but also stern enough to say, no, this is what we're doing. Time to put all that to the side. You've made your points. Let's go. And that comes with the players and the coaches. And he made a great point about, look, I'm not doing right by the players if I'm not willing to hold them accountable. And I think that's true. But I think what's going to be beneficial is his manner of holding kids accountable is something that players are going to relate really well to, which we've already seen at tight end. It's demanding, stern, and all that, but also energetic, positive. It's much more of a positive reinforcement thing on top of the high demand, right? And I think that's something that's going to be a nice refreshing change. The last two offensive coordinators had a little bit of a different view on that. Not better, not worse, just different. And I think for a unit that needs to have its confidence rebuilt, I think that's the kind of personality that's going to work too. And you saw it in the press conference, Ryan. He's very engaging. He's very personable, but he's also serious. He's not a jokester. He's not he's not up there clowning around trying to make everybody laugh, but he's also willing to do so at times when it's needed to be. And I think that's something that we saw come through the press conference as well, Ryan.
Well, I think that you need that balance too when you're in a situation where Coach Parker is, right? Because I think when you look at him, he understands what's being said, right? Like he understands that there's a lot of fans that aren't on board with the hire that do have their question marks, and some fair, some very unfair. Right? There's not a one size fits all to the criticism that's out there. And I think Coach Parker and, most people would say, I don't care about the outside noise, but you hear it. It's impossible not to hear. So Coach Parker's in a situation where the minute that he has a bad, poorly called game or a poor offensive performance for the team, there are going to be naysayers that are going to say, oh, this is why you shouldn't have made the hire. Like that's going to happen. And I think having his balance of his personality where I think that he has a mild-mannered kind of feel to him as far as the ability to connect with players and to get them to buy in. But also, like you said, I mean, this is a business thing that's going to happen now, right? Like every day needs to be, we're trying to get somewhere. We have goals in mind, goal-oriented, I think is a good way to kind of put this thing. So I think that balance is needed because there is going to be some pushback. There is going to be some pressure, and he understands that. And I think the best thing is that when anybody feels that type of pressure, the best is not to hide from it, right? Like, I know that there's people talking. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to prove them wrong. Like, at the end of the day, that's the point blank period to it. And I hope he does. I think he can. Now it's all about putting that plan to a process. But I do like the mix of his personality. I think that you saw that yesterday in the meeting, right? Like, you're right. He was up there to say, like, this is what I believe in, and not all lighthearted. But you could also see some of his charisma is the fact that he isn't this, like, this staunch guy that's just like overbearing and you can't talk to him. Like, he's relatable, which is good. You need to be relatable, but you also need to understand that, like, hey guys, we have a job to do. We have to get down to it. So I think not hiding from the pressure is the biggest thing for him, man. Don't hide from it. Just look at it straight in the face and say, like, I don't care what you guys have said about me. I don't care what, Johnny Joe over there has said about me. At the end of the day, I'm going to get stuff done and I'm going to prove the doubters wrong.
We talked a little bit about some of the things he wants to do offensively. I mean, he didn't really say anything that we haven't addressed in our previous shows. So I think we don't need to spend a whole ton of time on that. So I do think that we'll kind of hold off on that again until we get to the spring. We've already addressed what we think we're going to see run game wise and all that. A lot of the stuff he talked about was just generalities, which is kind of what you expect from an opening press conference. And so I think those are going to be interesting things that I'm looking forward to in the spring. Now, as far as how the staff looks, Ryan, at the end of the day, we don't really know what it's going to look like. So they still have to put it together. And that's when we'll really have an idea of how this thing is going to work together. We'll have a much better idea of how this thing is going to work together once we finally see what the whole staff is going to look like. But wrapping up, I thought Gerad Parker did a great job. I thought the intro was good. People got a chance to see the personality. He's a pretty sharp guy. He handled some pretty tough questions well. I mean, I thought Tim Priester asked him a really tough question. I know some people had a problem with the question. I didn't. I understood where it's coming from, and fans are thinking it. And so it was right to ask about kind of what happened at West Virginia. And I thought Gerad gave a very good answer to that. Coach Parker gave a very good answer to that. Look, I'm not going to get into too much. Here's what I was hired to do. Here's the job that I had. Here's what I did. I did my job to best my ability, and that's about all I'm going to say on that. So, I thought it was a good answer. And so that's the thing for me is I thought it wasn't just up there kind of getting like softball questions. I mean, in that setting, I don't care to go up there and hammer them and pepper them. Like that's not necessarily the occasion. I thought that, however, was a fitting question for the moment since it has to do with his background and qualifications for the job.
Sure.
So I thought I thought his answer to that was good. I thought he showed reverence for Tommy Rees and respect for Tommy Rees. It wasn't up there saying, hey, this is bad. This is terrible. He did a crap job and I got to fix everything. because there's no need for that, whether you believe it or not. And I don't know that he believes that. I'm not saying he believes that. I'm saying it doesn't matter. I thought, look, last OC was a former player. We're going to focus on what I want to do. And I thought that was a positive as well, and the way that he answered those questions. So let's move on to the next topic, Ryan, and that is the offensive line coaching hire that still needs to be made. We'll talk a little bit about where things stand. We'll talk about just what we need to see from this hire. So obviously Notre Dame is they've started to narrow their list down a little bit from talking to a source today, but it's not like there's not like a group of finalists right now, right? There's a big group of names that we all got at the beginning. It was like 20 names. It was like, okay, 3 of these guys just got fired. 3 of these guys just like retired. You know what I mean? Like, so, okay, let's see where this is going to go. They've started to, whittle it down a little bit. They're still in the process of doing so. I expect some more Zoom conversations to happen. They're going to bring some guys in for interviews. They have brought one guy in. At least one guy in has gotten an interview as well. Chris Watt will be someone that is considered for the job. In regards to names, look, here's the deal. We're not gonna continue to play this game, right? In where this kind of weird flight tracker thing, like there's some serious online stalkers that are just I think it's creepy. But the reality is, it doesn't matter who gets brought in. There's only going to matter one thing, and that's who they hire. Okay. When we get the okay to put names out, I promise you we'll let you know. But there's reasons why you don't want to let names get out. And we just experienced that with the offensive coordinator hire. Did we not? And so we're just not going to go there. And when we are given the okay to give you guys names, we'll let you guys know who they're brought in. But they have begun the interview process. It's not going to be something that I necessarily think will automatically happen soon. If the right hire comes along and everything clicks, then they could move quickly. But there's a lot to this, because there's a lot of interest in this job. That's the one thing that we know, Ryan. There's a lot of interest in this job. The important thing is they've got to get this one right. We could talk about what you think of Gerad Parker. I do like the Gino Guidugli hire. Obviously, Dylan McCullough and Chancey Stuckey, I thought both did very good jobs last year. Gerad Parker did a very good job as a tight ends coach. We'll see if that also translates to being a good offensive coordinator. I think Gino Guidugli comes in with a good reputation as a quarterbacks coach and recruiter. But all those hires are good. They're fine, move you in a positive direction and all that kind of stuff, if you believe that to be true. But the offensive line hire is either going to step it back or it's going to take it even to another level. And it's absolutely imperative that Marcus Freeman hit an absolute home run with this, because if he believes in Gerad Parker, and he does, the reality is the best thing that he can do for Gerad Parker is make sure that he hires as best of the best offensive line coach that he can. Whether it's someone who has a proven track record, or if it's a situation where Gerad Parker's like, hey, look, I worked with Chris Watt last year, and that dude and I are on the same exact page. I think he can do a great job. That's fine. If he wants to go that route, I don't care. It just needs to be a home run hire. Obviously, the bigger the name, the more splash, but it's got to be a good coach. And that's going to be the big thing, because this hire will make or break his offensive coordinator hire, in my opinion. You go out and get a very good offensive line coach, then you give your coordinator, your friend, the guy you believe in, Gerad Parker, you give him the resources that he needs to go be successful. If you don't get this right, then he won't have the resources to be successful. It is that important of a hire, Ryan, in my opinion. And I'm not being hyperbolic. I actually believe that to be the case. This is a huge, huge hire for Marcus Freeman.
Well, I mean, because I think one thing that you already mentioned that I think we need to harp on a little bit is that there is going to be high demands for this job. And why is that? It's one of the more attractive position coach jobs, I think, in college football. I really believe that, because I was writing an article earlier about, how the recruiting for offensive line in 2024 could change a little bit, and I kind of went in depth on why that is. And I think there's a lot of resources for an offensive line room at Notre Dame. Obviously, you talk about the pertinence to being in the Midwest, where a whole lot of good offensive linemen are usually developed on the high school level. You usually find a lot of good guys relatively in the same ballpark of South Bend, Indiana, guys in, the state of Ohio and Michigan. They've offered guys from the Missouri area. Like there's a bunch of good offensive linemen in that area, in your backyard, Pennsylvania. Not only that, I mean, there is a name recognition. I know we talk about Harry Hiestand and all the great things he did to develop offensive line U, and please keep doing it because he did a tremendous job. I mean, we can rattle off the names every single podcast and there will be remembrance to it, right? It's like, wow, that's incredible what he did there. But as of now, Notre Dame still has stay power with that offensive line U conversation. So, yes, people know who Harry Hiestand is, but recruits more than anything are going to say, like, oh, Notre Dame? They've put out Quentin Nelson. They put out Zach Martin. They put out Ronnie Stanley. There's a name to that university as far as what they do offensive line. So recruiting at the offensive line spot should be a pretty easy thing at Notre Dame. It should be, from where you are regionally to what you bring to the table to what your reputation is as offensive line developers. Recruiting should be a pretty easy thing. And then not to mention, whoever the next offensive line coach is going to walk into Joe Walton, Blake Fisher year one as third-year players, man. That's a pretty dang good place to be. You know, that's not even counting Zeke Correll coming back. It's not even counting some of the young bucks coming up like the Billy Strouts of the world. It's not even counting the five-man 2023 class. It's not even counting Peter Jones, who's committed in the 2024 class to Notre Dame. Like, there's a lot of resources around this university as far as offensive line. It's the tradition, the ability to recruit, regionally has it makes sense. The offensive line position at Notre Dame, the coach position, should be one of the more attractive positions in all of college football. It's an easy sell, man. You're going to coach great players. You're going to have the ability to attract more great players, and you're going to be able to continue the tradition of offensive line use. So you have to knock this out of the park, not only for the simple fact that, hey, you have an unproven offensive coordinator, very promising. You have a good quarterback coach, but you don't 100% know what 100% the full vision is going to be moving forward. You know what they want to do, but what is it going to look like? Well, building through the offensive line is going to be a big bonus to that offensive ability to call offensive plays for this team. We know the strength that it should be in 2023, but more than anything, you need to knock the hire out of the park simply because that job should be incredibly, incredibly attractive to a lot of different people. We think it is. We know it is. And Notre Dame needs to make a big hire here because, again, man, if you can't get a great offensive line coach at the University of Notre Dame, that's a little bit of an issue.
Yeah. There's four things for me that are key to this hire. And the reason I don't care so much about names is because there's not one guy that would crush it at this job. That's the reality of it. There's not one guy that would do that. There are several coaches that could do that. Here's where it needs to be. Number one, you need to bring someone who has a plan for how to make this a physical unit. Now, in this instance, you're building on what Harry already started. So Harry Hiestand kind of reversed course. Notre Dame was not a physical offensive line in past seasons under Jeff Quinn. They just weren't. Harry has kind of gotten that back on track. It's not completely where it needed to be. And it wasn't expected to go from 0 to 100 in 1 year. You got a long way down the road. Coach Hiestand would have built on that in year two. Now it's up to the new hire to build on that in year two, to take that level of physicality and toughness to another level. That's number one. Number two, this needs to be a coach who believes in the importance of technique. If you don't think technique is of the utmost importance, it's the top two traits. You need a guy that's tough, and you need a guy that's technically sound. That's what an offensive lineman needs to be. That's what an offensive line needs to be. Above all things, if you don't have those two things, you're not going to have a great offensive line. And so you need a guy that understands the importance for technique and then has a plan to carry it out. That's what the interview process is for. You watch film and see if his units have carried that, have actually shown that. So that's what you see from film. Number three, Ryan, you need to have someone who has a track record, who has a belief and a track record for coaching the entire depth chart. One of my biggest issues with the Al Golden hire, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, is that and same with the Al Washington hire. My two biggest issues from everything I've been able to gather from source after source after source, is they do not do a good job of coaching the entire depth chart. And so the younger guys are basically just they miss a year. Okay, that can't happen on the offensive line where you have a lot of guys. Now you can say a GA is going to help with that. But it's like what Charles Jagasol said. One of the things he found that he loved about Coach Hiestand is he coached the twos just as hard as he coached the ones. You need that. That's because great O-lines are going to have to turn guys over almost every year. Have you put those guys in position where they're ready to make smooth transitions? That's got to be important thing number three. And number four, he's got to have a guy who has a track record of success on the recruiting trail. I don't care if it's a grinder. I don't care if it's a a guy that's not a grind. That doesn't matter. It's results. Do you get results? Ryan, all the stuff you talked about Notre Dame's track record helps to sell it, but you still got to go put the work in. And so to me, find a guy that can give me all four of those, and I'm happy. And Notre Dame should be happy. We were asked, who's y'all's top choice? I don't have one. Just like I never told you who our number one hire was on the offensive coordinator situation until that number one became the guy, and things didn't work out, because what tends to happen is people focus on that one name. And if that's not the name, then it appears that Notre Dame is settled, number one. Number two, I don't know if my number one is Marcus Freeman's number one. And number three, if I go out and say they've got to hire this guy and they don't hire that guy, and then I'm critical of the guy they hire, it's going to be, well, you just don't like that guy because he wasn't your number one choice. So I'm just not going to get into that game. There is more than one guy that Notre Dame could hire that could do a great job here, without question. I remember when Harry Hiestand was hired in 2012, there was a lot of angst with Notre Dame fans because all the Tennessee fans kept telling us how bad he was, right? And we knew that not to be true, and he went out and did a great job. So find a guy that's going to do a great job. That's what I care about. And as long as he has high marks in those four areas that we just discussed, Ryan, knows how to build a physical and tough unit, is a technician, teaches technique, emphasizes technique, gets technique out of his linemen, as long as he's a guy that knows how to to coach the entire depth chart, and as long as he gets recruiting results, I don't care who it is. I really don't care who it is. That's the important thing for me, and that's what Coach Freeman has to strive for when it comes to this hire.
And like you said, it's a big board right now, right? Like there's a lot of names that are on there that Notre Dame is doing, obviously, their due diligence with, and then they're making sure that they're not missing an opportunity here. I mean, there was one name yesterday that I know we talked about, Brian, in private, where I was just like, I hadn't even thought about that name for Notre Dame for the job. I hadn't even really thought about it, but like, cool, that would be awesome if that's ultimately the name. Yeah. Right, exactly. So to your point, there's a lot of good offensive line coaches out there, man. And there's a lot that I think are good. They're going to be attracted to the Notre Dame job opening. And it's just a really big list right now, man. I mean, literally, I don't think it's hyperbole. I really don't. I think there'd be about 8 to 10 names that just based upon just some things we've read or heard or whatever it might be, where I'd be like, you know what? If that was the guy, I'd be pretty happy about it, man. Right. Like, I don't think that this is, because it's different from an offensive coordinator job, right? It's different from a defensive coordinator job. It's definitely different than a head coaching job. Usually there's a few prime candidates where you're like, that has to be kind of the group, right? The top group. Offensive line coaches, there's some good guys out there, man. There's a little more depth, I think, of guys that you look at, not only just guys that have legitimate names right now or legitimate reputations, but like up and comers too, where you're like, well, that guy did a great job at that school previously, like imagine what he could do with some of the resources that Notre Dame has. So, I mean, again, you're casting a wider net, because I think Notre Dame understands. I think Marcus Freeman understands. This is just my opinion here, but I think they understand that, like, this is an important hire. This is very important. So we're not going to rush this guy. We're going to do our due diligence, and we're going to take a look at a lot of different people to make sure we're hiring the best guy possible. Because offensive coordinator did not end up the way maybe we envisioned it early on. But if you end now with Gerad Parker, with Gino Guidugli, and a home run offensive line hire, then you feel really good about your opportunity going into 2023. And I think they understand the importance of that, just like I know you do.
Absolutely. And so that'll be the focus. I think we'll start getting some clarity in the next few days as far as at least who the targets and candidates are. But, we'll see who it is. But, look, I'd like for this to happen pretty quickly. I think it'd be ideal to get something on place before – obviously, before spring ball, that's an obvious one. But even where you at least have a full week or two before spring ball starts to kind of really get this thing going. So those are different aspects of this that I think that they need to focus on with this hire. So very important hire, very important process. They've got to get this right. That's the big key, Ryan. They've got to get this right. So let's move on to topic number 3, Ryan. And that is, I released my 2023 class rankings this week. It's with everything kind of going on in the last month, it's been including some health issues that I had to deal with as well this past week. But it took a little longer than normal to get this out. There was also some kids we had some hard time finding film on, to be honest with you. And there's a couple kids we really don't have any senior film on. Brennan Vernon, for example, I don't have senior film on, so his grade is going to fall a little bit. Brubacar Traore was hurt for a chunk of the 2022 season. There's not a lot of film there. So, those things kind of hinder those grades. So that keeps that in mind. And so what we did is I'm going to put the 2 links in the article now, but I rank them offense and defense. I have no problem, Ryan, with people who rank a class with everyone together. There's nothing wrong with that. So when I say this, it's not a criticism of those who may do it differently. I just don't think it really is as productive for me in the way that I evaluate to have them on one list, because I think it's like offensive guys are going to be asked to do something different than the defensive guys and vice versa. So we did 2 breakdowns. I just put them in, and it's the offense and defensive ranking. So I have the current grade. The current ranking is basically where they grade from where they are right now. It takes into account a couple different size body strength type of categories. Each one has a couple 2 to 3 athleticism categories. They're different for each position. They're specific to each position. There's technique and intangibles categories that go into each grade. And so I add all of them up, and then bam, I've got my grade. And then there's also an upside grade. In each article, I have the current grade. So the main ranking of the article is where they are now. When you look at the upside grade, that's at the bottom. That's more about if everybody taps into their potential, this is where I would rank the guys. And so that is something obviously that's in there as well. So what I'm going to do, Ryan, is just kind of go down and run through my grades. Just kind of briefly talk about what I saw from each guy, why they went up, maybe why they went down, because some guys went down because other guys just had higher rankings, even though their grade went up. And then I'll give my upside grade at the end. So let's start with the offense, Ryan, and I'm going to give you a chance to kind of give some your thoughts on my list, or to share where you have certain guys. If you want to go through your 12, you can list them as well. And so I'll begin number 1, Ryan, is Charles Jagasaw. He's the only 5-star player in the class for me. I don't give out a lot of 5 stars. He is a guy that after his senior year, we always knew he had the size, always knew he had the power, always knew he had athleticism. Now, could he turn it on in the football field? We'll find out. I thought he made huge strides as a senior technically, and he became just a dominant player. And he's part of a really quality offensive line class. Without question, one of the 5 best line classes in the country, in my opinion. He's number 1. You just can't teach that combination of size, power, and athleticism. Whether he's a left tackle, right tackle, guard, I don't care. He's going to be really good wherever he plays if he continues to develop. He was a pretty easy number 1 for me after watching senior film, Ryan. There wasn't anybody within it wasn't a challenge, really. He was clear number 1. My number 2 in the class, Ryan, is Jeremiah Love. Jeremiah is a guy that had skyrocketed as a senior. Look, the knock on him as a junior was I loved the size, I loved the athleticism, I loved the versatility. He could do a lot of different things. He could play corner, he could play receiver, he could play not receiver as a full-time receiver, but he could line up out wide, he could catch the ball in the backfield, and of course, he could do some things as a home run runner. But he wasn't like an every down back. He was more of a slasher type, right? Well, as a senior, he looked much more like a natural running back. He looked much more like a guy that can be an every down back, not just a change of pace back with home run speed. He showed physicality as a senior. He showed better vision. He showed better feel for the position. He became a complete back, and he jumped into the top 50 category for me. He is my only other player in this class on the offensive side of the ball that ranked that earned a top 50 overall grade for me. So Jeremiah had a huge jump as a senior for me. My number 3 is my former number 1, and that's Braylon James. Now, Braylon's grade went up for me, Ryan. It's just that Jeremiah and Charles skyrocketed for me. I thought Braylon this year showed improvement. He was stronger. He playing in an offense that allowed him to run a little bit more of an expansive route tree showed promise. He was, and they also used him a lot more to run deep. They threw him a lot more deep balls this year, which I loved. And so he took a jump this year, Ryan. He didn't take as big of a jump because really, honestly, his technique didn't really see a ton of improvement. He still needs a lot of work as a technical player, but the tools are there. All 3 of those guys earned 5-star upside grades. So Jaden actually, his grade went up for me. It's just that he is still a guy to me, Ryan, that the technical aspects of it still need work. All 3 of those guys earned 5-star upside grades and top 100 rankings, as did my next guy on the list, Ryan. Actually, my next guy on the list, yes. Number 4 for me is Jaden Greathouse. Now, Jaden's senior year did not go as planned from a production standpoint, but honestly, we didn't expect it to because he didn't have Cade Klubnik throwing the ball anymore. They had a new quarterback that became more of a run-oriented team this year at Westlake, Austin Westlake. So his production wasn't there. He got hurt at the end of the year. He was a little banged up at times. But I actually think he became a better player because of that, because he did have to work a little harder and make even tougher catches, where Cade Klubnik was putting that ball like perfectly thrown, and he had to like make these great back shoulder throws, but the defender didn't have a chance. I mean, there were throws that he had to catch, Ryan, like early in the year. He made this one great play early in the year where he just like literally jumped over two guys and had to like moss them for the ball. That stuff wasn't happening when Cade Klubnik was his quarterback, because Cade was making better throws than that. So I actually think he became a better player this year, even though the production didn't look like it. Now, why he isn't as high as the other guys for me, and I know you'll have something to say about this when you do your rankings, it's just the lack. He doesn't have the same explosiveness that the other guys do. His floor is higher than anybody in this offensive class. Anybody in this offensive class. And I think his ceiling is high. I think there's still room for him to be a better, impactful player. But the lack of just the home run athleticism that Jeremiah Love and Braylon James bring to the table is why he's slightly behind those guys right now. Those grades certainly rank higher than him, but his overall feel for the game, technique, and ball skills are just out. They're as good as anybody in the country, much less in Notre Dame's class. My number 5 guy also ranks as a top 100 player, but not a 5-star upside guy, and that's Kenny Minchey. We've talked a lot about Kenny Minchey on the show. Everybody knows I love him. Great feel for the game. Really smart, compact, quick release. Great anticipation. He's got all the skills you want in a quarterback. Doesn't have a huge arm, and he's not the tallest guy. Those are the knocks on him. But as far as that, keep him from being an even higher ranked player. But he's a top 100 player for me, Ryan. No question about it. 4.5-star player. Number 6 for me is one that's going to be a little bit, probably one that people might disagree on a little bit, and that is Caleb Smith, the kid who they signed late that they flipped from Texas Tech. Like, I love this kid. He earned a top 150 overall great caliber grade for me. That's how I do rankings. It's top 25, top 50, top 100, top 150, top 200, top 250, and then top 400 basically is kind of how I go. 300 to 400 is how I go. He was a top 150 guy for me. Love the ball skills. Love what he does after the catch. Love his ball. He's a very good route runner. He's got really impressive ball skills. He can be a big-time punt returner. I like a lot of things about Caleb Smith. That was a very sneaky pickup for him. Just does a lot of things that I like a lot. Does he do anything great? No, but he does a lot of things really well. I see him as a slot guy, and I also feel the need for him was really high as well. Didn't factor into his grade, but I thought they needed a guy like that. Number 7 was another high riser for me in this grade, and that's Sam Pendleton. Sam was near the bottom of the rankings for me when they first got him. He was probably second or third to last. He had a big jump for me. Now, his ceiling isn't as high as like a Sullivan Absher or even a Joe Otting, in my opinion, but his floor is incredibly high. He actually got quicker as a senior. I thought his athleticism flashed better. He's here because he is one of the most physically imposing players that Notre Dame signed in this class. The only other guy that's as physically dominant as him, just physically dominant, is Charles Jackasaw. That's it. And Sam is a guy that I love as a guard at the next level. Love his character. He's a future captain type of guy. But his physicality was always there. But the thing that I thought is he moved better as a senior. He moved on the second level better. His pulls and traps were better. I just thought he looked more comfortable in space in high school. He's not going to be a tackle at the next level. But in high school, he looked so much more comfortable in pass pro on the edge. So it's because his foot quickness and agility was better. So I love Sam Pendleton. He saw a big jump for me. Now he's lower down in the upside grade, but I did like him. Rico Flores is next for me. Rico got a top 200 caliber grade for me with a 4.5-star upside grade. Like Rico a lot. Very precise route runner. Very good ball skills. Tons of production in high school. This is a kid that knows how to play the game. He's going to end up being a guy that probably outproduces his ranking. Shouldn't say probably. Has a chance to outproduce his ranking. Love what he brings to the table. Again, it's sort of like Jaden Greathouse. He just doesn't have the same level of explosiveness as the other two receivers ahead of him. 2 of the 3 receivers ahead of him, Caleb Smith and Braylon James. But he did look quicker as a senior than he did as a junior off the ball. His top end speed looked a little bit better. But he's just not a guy that I see as like that home run guy, which kind of brings his grade down a little bit. And he's not as big as Jaden Greathouse, for example, because Jaden can make up for some of those things with great size and strength. but I like Rico a lot. Look, Ryan, in past years, Rico Flores is a top 5 signee in the Notre Dame offensive class. I mean, that's how deep this class is. To have Rico down at 8 and then Sullivan Absher at 9. Sullivan Absher is a guy that I've really had to work with his ranking a lot, because I was willing to, as a junior, kind of be okay without really seeing him in pass pro. But now that he's gone through a senior year, it's just I couldn't continue to grade certain things about him as high because of that lack of pass pro. I don't actually hold the All-Star game against him. I don't care about that for me, because I know he went in there, number one, the circumstance, he got called like a week and a half before the event started and said, hey, can you come? Yeah, it's like, it was crazy. So can you come down here and play? So it didn't have the time to prepare for it like other guys did. And the kid just has never been in pass protection. But so his grade didn't go down because of the All-Star game, but the All-Star game kind of was the evidence of you can only rank him so high because of the fact that he has so much of a big part of the game to learn. And so that's kind of where he fell down, but still top 200 guy for me. I never thought he was a top 100 guy like On3 had him for a while. Then I think they overcorrected and dropped him out of the top 200. So to me, top 200 guy for me, 4.5-star upside guy, borderline 5-star upside, but just not quite the athleticism that I want to see from a 5-star upside guy. And that's really where it was for me. Love the size, love the power, love the strength, love the demeanor, love the personality. I just need a guy to be a little bit more athletic than he is to be a 5-star guy. But also the system he plays in makes it a little harder for him to show sometimes just what his athletic potential is going to be. Number 10 for me is Cooper Flanagan. I like Cooper Flanagan, but it's one of those things where there's just nothing he does. It's great. He's just solid everywhere, which is going to hurt your grade in a ranking like this, but also helps you have a chance to be a pretty darn good football player when you get to college, right? Because he just does everything. He does it well, just not great at everything. The other part of it too is there's not a ton of senior film of Cooper Flanagan, which hurts his grade as well. I was able to find one full game and was able to evaluate that game. It was an okay performance, but I didn't want to focus too much on it, because if you watched Tom Brady in his career in some of his worst games and all you saw was his worst games, you don't think he's a very good quarterback, right? That's true for everybody. But he's down partly this low because there's just not a lot of senior film of him. And that's something that hurts him a little bit. But I love the size. He's 6'5". I think you told me the other day that he said he's already over 250. That's a big boy. I love his blocking. I think he can be a good chain mover as a pass catcher, but he's just to be a tight end and be higher on my list, I just need you to be more of a weapon as a pass receiver. And I think he'd be a good, solid Ben Koyak type of pass catcher in college. I just don't see him being the impact pass catcher that he's going to be, which is partly why he's down. But again, having a guy like Cooper Flanagan, who I ranked as a top 250 caliber recruit, as your number 10 player in the class, says a lot about the depth of this class, Ryan. Number 11 is Joe Otting. Love Joe as a player. Love the upside. His upside is more of the focus on right now. He gained some weight, got up to around 265, 270 this year. Athleticism stayed. That was a positive sign. The punch is there. He's much more physical than you'd expect a guy his size to be. He's really this low, Ryan, because he just didn't make, for me, the big jump that I hoped he would make as a senior. Now, part of that is going to be because Joe is not a football-only guy. And guys like him always get better in college than they necessarily progress through their high school careers, which is why his upside grade is still high. Love his potential, though, at the next level, Ryan. And again, it speaks to the volume of this class because he's another top 250 guy. There's a big gap between 11 and 12 for me. Chris Tarrick was a guy, he was the lowest ranked player in the entire class for me, 3.5-star kid, top 400 caliber prospect, 350 to 400 caliber prospect. I love the size. I love the toughness. He is the epitome of a phone booth player to me at the next level, but just just the athleticism that I see on film is the thing that kind of dragged his grade way down. But very high marks for size and toughness, very high marks for physicality, very high marks for run game production. It's just the lack of foot quickness. He's got some tightness in his hips, and I think those things are just. He's a lot like what Josh Lugg was post-injury. He's got some tools like a Josh Lugg has, but just doesn't move quite as well as Josh does. But good pickup. If that's your number 5 offensive lineman in the class, Ryan, you got a pretty darn good offensive line class. And I know some others have him ranked higher. I think that he's still a 4-star by a couple different services, but good, solid pickup, but just not to the level of some of the other guys. So, Ryan, that is my 12-man ranking for the Notre Dame offensive class. Real quick upside grade: number 1, Jagasol; number 2, Braylon James; number 3, Jeremiah Love; number 4, Kenny Minchie; number 5, Jaden Greathouse; number 6, Caleb Smith; number 7, Sullivan Absher; number 8, Rico Flores; number 9, Joe Otting; number 10, Cooper Flanagan; number 11, Sam Pendleton; number 12, Chris Tarrick. So that is my upside grade, right? So just thoughts on the offensive class. If you want to give your ranking, you can give your ranking, but that's kind of where I had the offensive class. And there's definitely some movement for me in this one.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot I agree with, Brian. I mean, it really is. I mean, because I would just want to work through like a couple of my thoughts as far as maybe a couple of changes that I would make, right? A couple of guys that would be a little bit higher. And I think that that's kind of where I'm parlaying, because you're right. I mean, there were a lot of pockets in this ranking, in my opinion, where it's just like, man, like 2 to 3 players who are just like, they're such similar ballparks, right? That you almost get to a conversation piece of like tiebreakers, right? Like it really comes down to those types of conversations for me. I mean, I think if we're working straight down, I mean, Charles Jagasaw and Jeremiah Love would be my top 2 in the class as well. Like there's no conversation piece in that. Braylon James and Jaden Greathouse, I think, is a great conversation. It is. And I know it's one that we've had countless times on this show, off this show, because at the end of the day, those are the 2 6'2 plus outside receivers from the state of Texas in this class that are both very well thought of. So they're going to be guys that are going to be kind of compared throughout their career, in my opinion. I think that people are going to kind of couple those 2 together and be like, those were your dudes in the wide receiver class in 2023. Both from the state of Texas, both from the same area of Texas as well, and both have, I think, tremendous upside as receivers. You know that personally, and I think this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody out there that listens to the show regularly, I would lead Jaden Greathouse over Braylon James, just slightly. And it more comes back down to, because we agree in the simple fact that Jaden Greathouse does have a higher floor. I mean, yeah, sure. I think I have a little more of what the upside could be with Jaden. And I know that you saw him as a 5-star upside grade, so it's not like you don't think that he has high upside,
We're
right?
nitpicking between 2 top 100 players is 100%. What it is, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think for me, because it comes down to this, right? I really think that this conversation could be kind of exemplified here. Which is more important to your offense? And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. This is why this is subjective. A 65 catch receiver that goes for 1,100 yards, or a 90 plus catch receiver that goes for 1,100 something yards. Technically, you're getting the same receiver yardage production. It just looks differently. And I think that that's really, it's apples to oranges, because at the end of the day, how Jaden Greathouse wins is a whole lot different than how Braylon James wins. He's going to create more explosive plays than Jaden is. I think Jaden, though, if he hits his upside and he becomes the player that I think he's going to be, he's that guy that when you need a catch most, you're going to look to Jaden Greathouse. That's going to be your guy. He's your money player. And I know you do too, but I really value those types of kids, man, because at the end of the day, when the game matters most, who am I looking to? Who's my guy that I'm going to get my eyes to quick? And even if he's covered or he has somebody in solid coverage against him, I'm going to try to put the ball in a spot that he can make a play on. And I think that's Jaden Greathouse. I think it is. So I simply would have those guys swapped, as far as I would have Jaden a little bit higher than Braylon. Braylon would still be in the same ballpark for me, though. He would be as far as your evaluation range, because if Braylon James hits, he's going to be a star. He's not going to just be a good football player. Like if he truly hits as good as he could be, because you can't teach 6'3", 185 that runs in the 4.4s. Like you just can't teach that stuff.
With long arms. Right.
Yeah.
Ryan, I feel like what we're doing is debating who's better, Michael Floyd or Will Fuller.
Exactly.
I feel like that's kind of where it comes down to. And the question is, well, what is your need? What do you like better, the possession guy or the home run guy? And I think that's what it comes down to for me. But Michael Floyd could also hit home runs, and Will Fuller had games where he could make a lot of catches. So, but we're 3 and 4 is still where you see them, right? Just flip it. Okay. How about after that? Where are you after that?
I think the other wide receiver conversation is where I look to next. Honestly, I think that for me, I think you're a little bit higher on Caleb Smith. We've talked about that a ton.
You can. I'm a lot higher on
You're a
Caleb
lot
Smith.
higher
It's
than
okay.
Caleb
You
Smith.
can say it. You can say it. It's all
I
good.
mean, just partially to your list, I would have Rico Flores higher, and I would just move Caleb Smith down. That's
would you
just kinda
flip
where
them
we-
6 and 8?
Rico
you
would
have
definitely go up to 6. There's no question. Caleb, I would have a conversation with whether he is at 8 or if I would have Sullivan Absher a little bit higher over him.
I'm sorry, 5. I had him at 6, but I had Caleb Smith at 6. You'd put Rico at 5, though, right?
No, I would put Rico at 6, right behind Kenny Minchie.
Oh, Kenny
So
Minchie.
I would definitely move Rico up to 6. My conversation would be: would Caleb be 8? Would he be 9? Like, where was he in that kind of bucket with like Sullivan and those types of guys?
Yep.
So, I mean, again, that comes down to personal preference. I like those types of players, and I'll be very forthcoming to my bias. My bias is I like the Jaden Greathouse types. I like the Rico Flores types. They might be exemplified as possession receivers, but I also consider those guys money players, you know?
Yeah. Yep. See,
Take a big jump as a senior. I thought I saw a much higher level athlete than what I saw as a junior. He was a good athlete as a junior. No doubt. I thought he was a very good athlete. He looked ton more explosive. I know you already talked about that. So we see that pretty close eye to eye. I just, again, Rico's floor is just so high in this class. So I would just have him a little bit higher, I believe. And then the other one that I just come back to, and it's, again, I think it is personal preference. Do you want Sam Pendleton higher? Do you want Sullivan Absher higher? Like, what's the tiebreaker there? And we talked about this on the phone, and I was completely like, I'm still okay, 100% okay. Like, Sam Pendleton had a tremendous senior year. I think Sullivan Absher had a really good senior year, but again, he had a really good senior year in a triple option offense where it's not 100% translatable to the next level. So it is a little bit of a wild card, especially because we know that the staff is most likely going to give him a chance to play offensive tackle early. So if your thought is,
I am curious about that when the new hire gets made. That's going to be very interesting to see if the new hire's like, look, we can waste a year of him trying to play tackle, but let's move this guy to guard because he could be starting guard for us like soon if he hits. That'll be interesting.
Because I think that changes a little bit of like your projection, a little, not you specifically, just in general of a Sullivan Absher, because it's much easier for me to project that guy at 6'7", 300 plus pounds if he is more just power setting in pass protection rather than, you know, a true kick slide, a true 45 degree, a true vertical set. Like, those things I don't want to see out of Sullivan Absher. I'll be completely honest about that. That's not his game. His game is I'm going to get inside position early on in reps, and I am going to stay connected. That is his game. So if I said right now that Sullivan Absher is 100% going to play guard from the day he gets on campus to the day he leaves campus, I think that kind of sways the importance of pass protections to a degree. It's not going to be quite as important as if he was going to play offensive tackle, because that is a completely different ballpark, man. Being comfortable in a 45 or a vertical set takes years and years and years for some guys. Like, it's not just a natural thing. The best things we love about Sullivan Absher and Sam Pendleton and some of these other offensive linemen in this class is what they do going forward. Some offensive linemen are just not comfortable playing in reverse. It's just not a comfort for them. But if you told me that Sullivan Absher 100% is going to be a guard at the next level, in my mind, I get a lot more eased to the fact that, like, hey, he has to learn pass protection, but I'd much rather teach him how to power set, you know, and get into a guy's grill early on than him having to kick slide in the traditional sets. And if he does do that and he is a guard early on, I mean, we've talked about this. I've been on the boat that, like, can he play tackle? Sure. But where would he fit best? Easily a guard for me. Like, it was never a conversation, because I do think Sullivan, I know you had a high upside grade on him, a bordering 5-star. You had a 4.5-star with a bordering 5-star grade on him as far as upside. He could be a dang good guard, man, at the next level. I truly believe that, especially in a system that is predicated on toughness, physicality, getting downhill, inside zone, combo to the second level, some duo ripped in there. Like, in that type of system, I think Sullivan Absher could be a really good football player. So I might just have him up slightly, possibly. But again, I'm open to the conversation.
That's the thing, though, Ryan, that's why I don't put upside into this particular ranking, because it's so much about projection. That's why I have an upside ranking, because you factor that out, because then you can start, you're just putting all your toolsy guys at the top. of a ranking. And so that's why I came up with the 2 ranking system to for guys like him. That's the guys like Sullivan Absher are why you have the upside ranking grade, because there is a significant gap. The debate I had about Sullivan Absher and the upside one, and it's like I've gone back and forth. Like I made the ranking when I made it, and then as I look at it now, I'm like, man, I probably should have put up Absher higher. I had him 7. You could have easily made a case that he's 6 ahead of Caleb Smith. And as I think about it, I'm like, yeah, I probably would. But it comes down to, for me, I've just still never seen him really pass, bro, as a guard or tackle. But the tools are there, and that's why you rank the upside grade, because it allows us to differentiate between what makes Sam Pendleton a good prospect and what makes Sullivan Absher a good prospect. For Sam Pendleton, it's like, dude, you know what he's going to be. He's a guy that could come in and play early and just be sound his whole career, you know? Whereas Sullivan Absher may not play for 2-3 years, but then all of a sudden the light goes on and you're like, holy moly, this kid went from being like not playing a lick to like he's one of your best blockers.
Yeah.
And that's why the upside ranking was put in there. So we also one guy wanted to ask you about, Ryan.
Yep.
We both have Christopher Tarrick at the bottom, I believe, of our ranking, correct? Where do you have Joe Otting in your ranking? Because I know you're a lot higher. You're not, I'll say a lot higher because I like Joe as well, but I think you're a tad higher from a ranking standpoint on Joe than I think than I was. Or do you think it's a fair place?
He would fit in the same exact spot, and it's not really as much about Joe as in the fact that, like you said, in a typical year, having a Cooper Flanagan as your 10th best offensive player, man, like that's wild. I mean, if we think about it, you know, like Notre Dame offensive recruiting this year, I would say, Brian, across the board, man, they hit their numbers that we've talked about. But they just got really good players across the board, man. Like, I mean, we're sitting here where you had 4.0 grades on everybody but one player of a current grade. I mean, that's wild when you really think about it. So I would have Joe in the exact same spot. I would have him at 11 out of the 12. And again, that's not much on Joe, because I think Joe could still be a really good center at Notre Dame if he adds the weight properly, if he is able to keep the athleticism that he has on a bigger frame, if he continues to develop properly. Like, I think he could do that. But at the end of the day, I mean, you still got Cooper Flanagan, Sullivan Absher, Rico Flores, St. Panther. Like, it's still a dang good list that's in front of him, right? So I don't think that changes the position. It's just the simple fact that, like, hey, man, you finished 11 out of 12 for the simple fact that Notre Dame got some dogs on the offensive side of the football, and just consistently across the board. I mean, there's a lot of high floor players in this class, and there's some other guys that you look at, not only high floor players like a Charles Jagasaw, Jeremiah Love, but like that upside is also tremendous. So I don't think it says anything about Joe Otting where he is on the list. It's just the simple fact that Notre Dame did a really good job hitting a lot of needs in this offensive group, I should say.
Well, that's another thing that one of the feedbacks was, boy, I'm a little concerned about how low ranked some of those offensive linemen are. And like that says that's because of how darn good this receiver class is. Like, trust me, like, look, this is the problem when you put a ranking. Somebody says, well, that guy's number 9. Gee, that's not good. In an offensive line, that's not good. No, it is good, because in other classes, he'd be 5, 6, 4. This is a phenomenal receiver class. They signed one of the best running backs in the country. They signed a top 100 quarterback in the country. 4 of the 5 offensive linemen ranked as top 250 guys or higher on our board, right? That's really good, including 1 5-star guy. So it says more about the skill than it does about anything else, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's really what it comes down to, man. It's like, I mean, to put it into perspective, all 4 of your receivers, I know you had top 100 grades on Jaden Greathouse and Braylon James. You had a top 150 on Caleb. So what'd you have on Rico? A top 200, right? On him?
Yes.
So you had 4 receivers.
And he was borderline 150 grade. He was really close to a top 150 grade. Because I have a point system. You have to get to a certain points number to be in that range. Like, it's divided up by points. And so, like, sometimes I'll have a gut feeling, this guy's going to be higher on my gut feeling, and then I type in the grades and I evaluate him, and he's not as high, or sometimes the guy's higher. Sam Pendleton was higher on my ranking than I thought he was going to be after I put everything in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's where that comes from.
Yeah, and I think that context is important. I mean, to your point of just where this, some of the spots that it's loaded, again, you have 4 receivers in the Notre Dame class that ranked as top 200 national recruits for you. Like, that is crazy depth at one spot. You have a running back, you have an offensive lineman in front, you have a quarterback. But I mean, really, it comes down to the skill positions that Notre Dame was able to get in the 2023 class at wide receiver and the running back they got in Jeremiah Love. I mean, you got in that regard, you're talking about 5 kids in your ranking that got a top 200 or better grade. I mean, that speaks volumes to the talent level that they got here.
Oh, it does, Ryan. And I think that was the key. That was the important part of this whole conversation was you needed to go out and get that kind of depth in this class. That was so, so very important. And, like last year, for example, this year, 11 of the 12 signees were top 250 guys or higher. Last year they had 9 of, guys like that. And in past years, it'd be lower numbers. I mean, for example, the 2021 class had some guys at the top of the board that ranked very high. It was a very strong class. But then there was after the first 5 or 6, there was a bit of a no, it's not. It was not last year's. I think the 2020 class. It was the 2020 class is what it was. So the thing I like about what Notre Dame is doing is they're starting to stack depth on top of each other. So the 2021 class, it was 7 or 8 deep of top 200 players. I had Audric Estime 8th in that class, and offensively, and Jaden Thomas was 9th in that class. So you're stacking depth. But this class has more top 250 guys on both sides of the ball than any class I've ever evaluated for Notre Dame. And so that says a lot in my view.
And I think we talked about this on the phone yesterday, but that's what makes Georgia so good, guys.
Right.
That's what it is. It's not. Yes, they have Jalen Carter. They have those types of guys, right? We don't have to talk about how good Jalen Carter is. I've talked about him 100 times already. That's a top 5 NFL draft pick every single year he comes out. He's that good. But it's the fact that you take Jalen Carter off the field. Here comes Bear Alexander and Warren Brinson,
right.
and they just throw waves at you, man. And that's where Notre Dame needs to get to is yeah, you're always going to need your stars. But when your stars come off the field, here comes wave number 2. Oh, man. We as an offensive staff now, oh, man, we got through the second wave. Thank gosh. Let's work to the third team. Here comes another wave. Just keep throwing waves at dudes, and they get overwhelmed. So that's what makes Georgia such a good team. That's when Alabama was really at its peak. They would just throw dudes at you, man. I remember when Marcel Darius was a second-string defensive tackle. Who the heck's Marcel Darius? And then he comes in there, and you're just this dude's a game wrecker. What are we doing here? That's where it comes from. You need those waves of depth. That's what I think is the real separator of today's game.
Right. Now, what I'd like to see them moving forward on offense is more of the top 50 guys. That's what I want to see. A few more top 100 guys, but it's getting much, much, much closer. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball because honestly, Ryan, I feel like the depth of the 2000. I think the top end talent of the offensive class is better, but the depth of the defensive class is better. And I'll get into that. And I think there's more true, there's really big time 5. There's more 5-star guys on defense than there are on offense in this class for me. So number 1, I had some changes at the top again. My previous number 1 was Drake Bowen. My new number 1 is Jaden Alsbury. Drake's grade went up in some areas, down in some other areas, and some different things. He was borderline 4.5-star top 250. He fell just a couple points. He's right on the brink of being that top 50 guy. So if I was doing a ranking, I'd have Drake probably at 55 to 60 right now, based on where his points were. And I'll get into that in a minute. But Jaden Alsbury really went up for me. He was a guy that was a 4.5-star guy for me last year. He went up again this year. Loved what I saw from Jaden Alsbury. Everybody knows he's one of my favorites. Athletic, high football IQ, got bigger this year, looked a little taller, filled out, was smooth, was explosive, was fluid, incredibly productive as a linebacker. And part of the thing I love about him too, Ryan, is he's a pretty raw player still technically. He just gets by on God-given ability. He's not a fundamentally sound player, which means when that comes, he's got a chance to be good. And he's a modern linebacker. And this is really what separates him and Drake Bowen. This right here is what separates the two. Jaden is, to me right now, much further along in pass pro than Drake is. Partly because in high school, Drake's mostly a zone guy, and he blitzes a lot. And Jaden just has a lot more experience at it and just plays more speed and has to be better at it. But his all-around game is just outstanding for me. I loved what I saw from Jaden Alsbury this year. Christian Gray is my number 2. If y'all remember, I had Christian Gray as a top 150 guy when he committed to Notre Dame. I liked him. I wasn't in love with him as a player. the speed that everyone said he had, I just didn't see on film, to be completely honest with you. He was solid. He stuck with people and all that. Christian as a senior was a much better player. He was a borderline top 50 guy for me as a senior. He was, I think, about 2 points off of being a top 50 guy. Drake was like 4 points off of being a top 50 guy. This is on a scale where their points are getting into the 600s and 700s, just to give you guys some context. And so they were very close to that top 50 range for me. Christian Gray's length, his athleticism, his football IQ. I mean, they got a lot of really smart kids on defense this year, right? Like really high football IQ guys. Christian's another one. But the biggest reason for the jump was, number one, I got to see him do it against dudes all year, and he was locking guys down. Locked down Carnell Tate, locked down Ryan Wingo, locked down Jeremiah McClellan, locked down Aaron Scott. I mean, he was lights out this year. But I saw the speed more. There was a play I showed to you that I was talking to you about where he's playing off coverage at like the 15-yard line. I don't know why they were asking him to do that. And the guy breaks on an in route right in front of him by 3-4 yards, and he just explodes to the guy. Maybe if the ball's thrown a split second sooner, it might be a touchdown because it was the way that the coverage was set up. But he just flew downhill. You could see the speed, and he just was able to break up the pass. That's what the big jump for me was about. He always had the good feel for coverage. He always had the length. He got stronger as a senior, a lot stronger as a senior, and his speed really flashed for me as a senior. That's why he was number 2. Drake Bowen for me is number 3. Drake had a he was the best, arguably the best high school football player in this class this year, in my opinion, as a defensive class. Like just what he did as a high school player was special this year. I love that he got stronger and thicker. I think his short area quickness is still outstanding. He's explosive in tight areas. I think he put a little bit too much weight on too quick because his long range speed to me wasn't as good this year as it was last year to me. His pass coverage grade is a little bit lower than Jaden's, but this is an outstanding football player that showed the thing that I liked about Drake is he looked more natural playing football this year, where in the past he was sort of an athlete that played football. This year he looked like a football player. He looked more instinctive, and he arrives at the ball with a lot of force. Yes. Drake is a really physical kid. And the other thing about Drake, the same also true about Jaden. He is a kid to me that has a lot of need for improvement. They both need a lot of work on block destruction, and Drake needs a lot of work on footwork. And that's where you kind of get excited, Ryan, because that's why they're 5-star guys, because they're not close to reaching their full potential. Jaden needs time in the weight room, and he's going to need that work as well. Drake's going to be, if anything with Drake, I'm like, let's get some of that muscle off of you and kind of build you up a little bit differently because you got a little tight this year. I think that's the thing that kind of hurt me with Drake is he wasn't as fluid as he was in past years, because I do think he got a little bit too muscular too early for me. And that's what impacted his grade, but still an outstanding football player for me, Ryan. And my number 3 guy. My number 4 guy, and this one surprised me. When I popped the grades in, this one surprised me. I knew he'd be up there upside-wise, but Brandon Hillman was my number 4 guy. And even grading him as a safety, he was my number 4 guy. And look, what do I love about him? He's long. He's exceptionally athletic. He's not a burner, but his explosiveness and change of direction and fluidity is as good as anybody in the class, in my opinion. His foot quickness is exceptional. He makes a lot of plays on defense for a kid that has no clue what he's doing technically at this point in time. And I love the versatility. You're talking about a kid, Ryan, that could start in college at 4 different positions: safety, rover, receiver, running back. The number of guys you could count that could be a starter at a place like Notre Dame at 4 positions is you could probably count it on 1, maybe 2 hands. That versatility was a big part of his grade. Incredibly productive, but man, this kid is athletic. And the more you watch this film, you're like, this kid is just a different kind of athlete. He reminds me a lot of Jeremiah Wusu-Koromoa coming out of high school, a lot, except he's a little bit more comfortable playing on the back end, where Jeremiah was more of a rover. He's got more speed than Jeremiah had. Jeremiah was not fast. Jeremiah was explosive and twitchy, but he wasn't necessarily fast in the traditional sense. But they play fast, and they're incredibly rangy, and that's what makes Jeremiah be able to play with the range he has. Even though he doesn't have 40 speed time, he's so exceptionally quick and explosive and instinctive, and that's where I think Brandon comes in. Number 5 for me was Micah Bell. Micah had another guy. He dropped a little bit, Ryan, in the ranking because the standard is a little bit different as a senior. the speed is unreal. This is one of the most explosive kids in the country, legit 4.3 speed, and surprisingly productive on the ball for a guy that's maybe 5'9.5", right? Maybe 5'10", makes a lot of plays on the ball. There's one, for example, he made in the All-Star game where he was playing the post on, I think, like a 6'3", 6'4" guy, and he out-jumps the guy and makes a breakup on the ball. He's a guy that I think brings a lot of return value to the team, punt return, kick return value. As a kid that can tackle for his size, projects more as a nickel outside corner to me. Nickel / outside, could play those two spots. The thing that hurt him a little bit is his technique saw no jump at all as a senior. So that grade went down because I expect you to at least show some improvement as a senior. And I didn't see any improvement from a technical standpoint as a senior, which again, ultimately doesn't hurt your upside because that's what your coaches are expected to do. And I have a lot more confidence in the Notre Dame cornerbacks coach to get that out of his corners than I do the linebacker coaches right now to get that out of the linebackers, if I'm being honest with you. Top 150 caliber prospect, but still another 5-star upside guy because you look at him, Ryan, and I see a guy that's faster and even more explosive than Tariq Bracy in a very similar body and already thicker than Tariq Bracy is at this point. So love this kid's upside. Number 6 for me is Devin Houston, which I think might surprise some people. Again, this is a current grade. This is where they are now. The upside grade is going to look a lot different on defense. There's a tons of you know what the upside grade is, Ryan, on all defense. It's wild. Love Devin Houston. Great size. Love him as a nose. Think he can play 3 technique. Again, another guy that needs a lot of technical work, but he is more consistent with his technique than the other D linemen. And so he makes a ton of plays, quick off the line. When he keeps his pads low, he's very disruptive. Love the length that he brings to the table. And I really think he could be a disruptive nose in this defense if they're willing to let him build into that. He's going to be an easy 300 pounds quickly. Like he's 270 now, and he's got a body that can get a lot of reshaping and add a lot of good mass. I love this kid. He earned a top 150 overall grade for me. My number 7 guy is probably the biggest riser in the class. I believe that Preston Zinner at one point was my lowest ranked defensive player in the class. I believe. I'll have to go back and look at my rankings. He shot up a bunch as a senior. He's number 7, but he earned a top 150 grade for me, Ryan. I love Preston Zinner's film, his senior film, and I just got it in the last couple weeks. He got taller. He added at least 5 to 10 pounds at least. His arms looked longer, and he didn't lose a step of athleticism as a senior. His range for his size, Ryan, is outstanding. Like I thought he was going to be like probably have to end up being a Viper, but when you watch him play this year, Ryan, he could be a Mike in this defense. He is rangy. His tackle-to-tackle explosiveness really impressed me as a senior. He arrives at the football with a lot of force. The only thing that kind of keeps him down is his coverage skills right now aren't what the other 2 linebackers are. And so that's a thing for me. And he's probably just a step slower than them, pure 40 time-wise. But his foot quickness, his agility, his change of direction, when he explodes downhill, Ryan, he covers a ton of ground. And he also is a guy that can still play Viper if you need him to. He could still grow into that position. But he looked like a much more natural linebacker as a senior, where he played a lot on the edge. He just looked like an athletic kid as a junior. He got taller, thicker, faster, more explosive, and looked like a more natural linebacker. He was a big riser for me, and I'm very curious to see what your opinion on that is once we kind of get to that point. 8, Brendan Vernon. Full disclosure, I saw maybe 10 clips of Brendan Vernon as a senior. So his grade is here. He fell down. He still got a top 150 grade for me, Ryan. Still gave him a 5-star upside grade, but the standard's different when you're a senior than you are a junior. I just didn't see enough of him, so I couldn't raise his grade or do anything with it. And still love the motor, still love the physicality. I saw some good things from him at the All-Star game, some really good things from the All-Star game, but I don't evaluate All-Star games, Ryan. They just don't mean a lot to me. I need to see what you did over the course of your entire senior season. And so Brennan fell down the rankings a little bit, but his upside grade is still 5-star. He's still a top 150 guy. I just can't justify keeping him in the top 100 because I just haven't seen enough film of him. So full disclosure, that's more of a lack of film than it is seeing something I didn't like from Brennan. And he's not the only one. Number 9, Adon Schuler. Him and Ben Minitzer, I have a feeling, are going to make me look dumb for where I have them ranked. I love everything there is about Adon, right? Smart, heady, playmaker, can play a couple different safety spots. The reason he's this low really is just because he doesn't do anything great. He's listed at 6'1", 190. He doesn't look 6'1" to me, right? And he looks more 5'11"-ish for me. but I love the feet. I love the physicality for his size. He's the big thing for me is for him to go up in my grade. I just need to see a little bit more man coverage from him, and we don't see a ton of that. I saw some good things at the All-Star game, but in high school on film, one-on-ones only tell me so much, Ryan. I need to see actually covering in games. I love the talent. He's a top 200 kid for me. It's just there's no grade. There's like each guy above him has like one or two grades that are just really higher than other grades, and that moves him up the list. For him, he's just really steady. Just everything is just good. There's nothing elite about him. But again, in other years, Adon Schuler's a top 5 to 6 prospect for Notre Dame. This year, he's 9th. Number 10 is Armel Mukam. I'm going to talk about him in a little bit later. Number 11 for me is Boubacar Traore. I'm going to talk about him as well. But for Armel, the reason he's here, he's still a little raw. And the level of competition he plays, to me, made some of the things he did look a little better than they actually are because he was playing guys that are way inferior to him talent-wise. And I'll get to him a little bit more. Boubacar, the reason he fell is simply, Ryan, he didn't play a lot as a senior, and there's very little film of him. And what I didn't see a guy that necessarily improved a lot technically. And he's an incredibly raw player. And so that's why he ranks lower. Still a 2.5, still a top 250 player. I'm gonna save the breakdowns of them for when I get the upside grade. Number 12 is Ben Minich. He's another one that I feel like is going to make me look stupid for this ranking. But I also think having Ben Minich 12th, and whether you want to put him 9th, 10th, 11th, 9th, whatever, having him in the bottom half of your class after the senior year he had and the jump in athleticism he showed says a lot about how deep your class is. Again, he is the 12th lowest ranked player in his class for me, Ryan, and he earned a top 2 defensive class. Earned a top 250 grade for me. Like, love Ben Minich, love his instincts. He's more athletic than I thought he was going to be this year. He hits, but a lot like Adon, he just doesn't do anything great that I've seen, but still a very good football player. Now to my upside grade. I had Hillman 3, Christian Gray 4, Micah Bell 5, Brendan Vernon 6, Drake Bowen 7, Jaden Osbury 8, all 5-star kids. Preston Zinner 9, Devin Houston 10, Ben Minich 11, Adon Schuler 12. I had Boubacar and Armel Mukam 1 and 2. And I know you and I talked about this. I think you have Armel 1, Boubacar 2. I have Boubacar 1, Armel 2. The reality is these are two of the most physically gifted kids in the class. They just have a long way to go before they're going to get there. I think Armel's further along now because of a senior year. He made jumps technically that Boubacar just didn't make in the limited snaps we saw from him. 6'4", 250, twitchy, burst off the edge, explosive off the edge. He's just still really raw as a player. And so he's down that low because his technique grades and things like that are really low for me right now. And he's still learning the game. And Boubacar's my number 1, Ryan. You talk about just God-given ability, 80-plus inch wingspan. So does Armel, by the way. 6'4", 255, could easily be a 280-pound defensive end. Boubacar could. He could also slide inside. I think Boubacar probably has a frame that's a little bit probably better suited down the road for D tackle than Armel. I feel like Armel's kind of already ripped up where Boubacar's just thick, so he could get up to 280 plus. But Boubacar, to me, Ryan, with his burst off the line, his hands are incredibly heavy and powerful. He just has no clue how to use them. When you talk about where these guys are ranked now in the lower grade, they would probably be borderline top 100 kids if I factored the upside grade into the current grade. If I combined them into one grade, they're arguably top 5 kids in this class on defense, Ryan, and both top 100 caliber kids. When I take the upside grade out, that's why they fell. And that's why they fell. That's why they're a little lower, because they're incredibly raw kids. But the God-given ability and length and explosiveness that Boubacar and Armel bring to the table is exceptional. And that's why they were huge pickups. They're just not guys, in my opinion, that come in day one and help you. And I would argue that Armel, a kid who's played football for 2 years, is more ready to come in and play than Boubacar is at this point in time, which is nuts. Yeah. And Boubacar also saw his grade get dinged because of the injuries. Like, that's part of the grade is he got a little banged up last year, and he got a little bit banged up again this year, and that factors into it. So that's my rankings, Ryan. And I don't know if I've ever had a year where I had kids ranked 10th and 11th on a side of the ball, then ranked 1 and 2, in upside grade. I don't know if I've ever evaluated that before, but that's where they are with Boubacar and Armel. And it's also same with Brennan Vernon, but that's also why the D-line class concerns me a little bit, because you've got a lot of boomer bust after Devin Houston. And the hit rate for boomer bust guys is lower than the hit rate for a guy that's a kind of a 5-star now, because the guy that's a 5-star now may never be a 5-star, but he's at least going to be he's a solid player for you, where these guys may never play a meaningful snap for you. But if they boom, they're going to be big time. But that's a little bit of the concern for me. And you throw Brennan Vernon into that category as well, is just, he could be a stud. And it could also just be a solid. I think Brendan's floor is higher than Armel and Boubacar's, but it's not as high as some people think. And I know you've made that case a lot before, Ryan. So what are your thoughts on the defensive class and where things are at this point?
I think it's a very interesting discussion because, again, similar to the offensive side of football, I think that there's some players that are grouped by position that you could have great conversations with of whether you want to flip them, whether one is maybe projects to a more important position, like those types of conversations happen. I mean, because I would also have Jaden Ausberry as the top linebacker in this class, right? Like I would have that slightly over Drake Bowen. But I think the conversation then comes to what's more important in your defense, right? And I don't think there's 100% of clarity to this. I know that it's a linebacker-driven position for how Al Golden likes to run his defense, but I remember when we talked about when I got first hired here, Drake Bowen was obviously already committed to Notre Dame, and we used to talk about, hey, does he keep his weight to about 215 pounds like it is right now? Because he's going to play college baseball and you don't want to put too much weight on and you want to, make sure that you're staying limber and you're staying, flexible. And at that point, we're like, is Drake a rover turned will eventually? Now I'm in the situation where I look at Drake Bowen and I'm like, he might be a Mike, right? Like he might be a Mike linebacker at the next level, which is a good thing, I think, because he is now. And I agree. I think there's a little bit of a reshaping of the body can happen, and not a bad reshaping. It's not like you're taking off bad weight and you're putting on good weight. You're just taking off good weight and you're putting on maybe more efficient weights, if that makes sense, right? But I mean, Drake Bowen now is 230 pounds. I think it was 231 pounds at the All-Star game. Like my guy is ready physically for, just from like if you see him on the hoof, like he looks like he's ready to go. So if you have a Jaden Ausberry and a Drake Bowen in a similar ballpark, does the positions that they project to, does that matter in your evaluation, Brian? Like I'm asking you that in general, right? So if you have two guys that are top 50-ish football players for you, let's just say in a vacuum, Jaden Ausberry is a true will at the next level and Drake Bowen's a true Mike. Does that change where you slot somebody because of how you value a position?
It depends on the specific defense he's going into, but yes, in theory, absolutely. For example, if a guy's going to if I have a Mike and a Will that are very close in grade, and he's going to a Mike dominant defense, then that's going to matter. That fit. That's part of the intangible grade is the fit, right? The fit of the system you're going into. At Notre Dame, however, I think the Will is the more impactful position. And so, yes, that did factor into the intangible grade for me because I think they can both play Mike or Will.
Yep.
I think they both can. I think Jaden could end up being a Jonathan Vilma type of Mike if he can get up to 225, right? However, I think Jaden is better suited at Will, could play Mike. Drake is better suited at Mike, but could play Will. Or potentially even maybe do some Viper stuff in pass rushing situations, like a Bo Bauer type of role. Yeah. So, yeah, Ryan, that does factor into it. It's one of those things that can separate the intangibles grade because you've got to find a way to fit to include fit into your evaluation of a kid. That has to matter when you're doing evaluations, and I know it does to you, where you can look at a quarterback and say, well, these two guys are very similar grade, but this guy's going to a system that fits what he does perfectly, and this guy's to a system where I'm like, I don't see what the fit is, right? Like that's one of the things that I thought was so smart about the decision that Nico, the quarterback from California, made going to Tennessee. I think he's a little overrated, but for his unique skill set and the needs he has as a player and the work that he's going to the perfect system for him. Like I literally, if you were to say, assign the quarterbacks where you think they should go, I'd have had a hard time finding a better fit for him than Tennessee. especially when you look at what Josh Heupel did with Dylan Gabriel at UCF for a year, a kid with a very long release that struggled after Josh Heupel left, in my opinion. And then you look at what he did with Hendon Hooker, another guy that's a longer limbed guy with a longer release because of how long limbed he is. Nico needed that kind of guy because that's a different type of coaching than a guy who's 6'2" with normal sized arm length. And so that factored in. Same thing here. So that did have a little bit of a factor into me. Just for example, Ryan, like Christian Gray is going to get a little bit of a boost for me over Micah Bell because he's a guy that I think can play the boundary. Where Micah's a field guy. It's like Christian can play all three spots. Micah can only play two. Well, that's going to separate things a little bit for me. So, yes, that's a great question, Ryan. And that absolutely, for me, is part of the injuries, production, and fit are three of the key categories in my intangibles grade.
Yeah.
And Jaden Alsbury, to me, graded out a little higher in that one than Drake Bowen did for me. Just a tad higher, because I do think of the will is such an important position in this defense, in my view.
And I think another intriguing conversation on the list is Brennan Vernon. I think he's another intriguing one because I agree there was obviously there's not a ton of film out there for Brennan's senior year and shouldn't be surprised just by knowing Brennan a little bit, right? But I think the one interesting part of him is that he was a player, and he would say this to you point blank period. Like, this isn't speculation. This isn't my opinion. He put on too much weight as a senior. He played at like 285, 290. And you could tell that his body type was just so much different than what it was as a junior. And I don't think he put on a bunch of good weight. I mean, he literally said at the All-Star game to reporters around him, and to me as well, is that he felt fat as a senior, you know? And so he goes to the All-American Bowl down in San Antonio, and he's 260 pounds, 259 pounds after playing at 285, 290. So while I agree, and I know we see eye to eye on this, I don't over evaluate on All-Star games. I don't do it because I've seen in the NFL draft space way too often. A guy has a subpar senior year, and then he goes to Senior Bowl. He knocks it out of the park, and all of a sudden, oh, man, that's who he is. Well, what about the 12 games he just played this past season? That doesn't matter at all over 3 days of practice.
Right.
So I 100%, I think we agree on that. But I think it's a little bit different when talking about Brennan, because Brennan also had a body transformation, right? Like, he was a different player in San Antonio than what he was in Mentor, Ohio, because he was literally 290 versus 260. You know what I mean?
Right. And not a good 290. And that's the thing he said. It wasn't a good 290. It wasn't like he was jacked up and where he needed. It was not a good 290.
Yeah.
Now you get to build him up to 290 the right way. So I'm glad he lost that weight. Now Notre Dame can build him up to 290 plus the right way if that's where his body can be, which I think it can.
Exactly.
I do.
Exactly. So while I don't go over the top on All-Star games, Brennan Vernon's performance at that All-Star game did mean a lot to me personally, just because he didn't look like he had good weight on him as a senior. He looked a little sluggish. He didn't look quite as explosive. In San Antonio, that wasn't an issue, man. Like, you saw it, right? Like, he moved incredibly well. His body looked great, and he improved throughout that entire week, because that's another thing is that Mentor didn't use him as an attack style player. They asked him to be very gap sound, don't attack, like just be a read and react player. And I thought that seeing what Brennan could look like when you just kind of take the shackles off a little bit and let him go, I think that showed me a little bit more of what he potentially is and can be, both into the kind of the player now and the upside, especially after losing that weight and being in a better body shape. So my only thing is that, like, you know, I'm not arguing about, like, I'm not saying like I would move Brendan Vernon from 8 up into 4 or something like that, but maybe I move him up 1 or 2 spots. You know, maybe I get him up to 6, up to 7, just based upon the body transformation and what I saw in San Antonio, because I just think he was a different football player than what we saw of him as a senior, if that makes sense.
It kept him from sliding for me as far as Boubacar did. I mean, to your point, right? Like, because I had him 6. It kept him from sliding down even further, because if it was just the senior film, the 10 to 12 clips we saw of him was an overweight kid that wasn't being used correctly, right? So I think it definitely helps solidify that. Really quick, Brandon Plesner, I didn't have Schuler 12 in the ranking. I had him 12 in the upside grade. That means if everybody maxes out their potential, he's 12. And the reason why is what I had said during the thing, which is I see nothing special about him physically.
Yeah.
All the special stuff about Adon is here and here. That's the reality of it. Whereas Ben Minich has a lot of that, but Ben Minich is a little bit more athletic than Adon is, from what I can tell. But I think it speaks volumes of just to what his upside is, because Adon's a really, really good football player.
And can I say, too, about Ben Minich, I think the one thing, too, is we just talked about the importance of, like, Mike versus Will in the defense. I value personally, and I don't know where you are on this conversation, but I value tremendously the guy that can play free safety and can play from depth a lot, because I think that helps everyone in front of him. I think it helps you be a little bit more aggressive in what coverages you want to run. And it makes a guy that can play some single high free safety and play that true role in the middle of the field, closed role. That guy, for me, if they can do that in an effective way, and what I saw a lot of Ben Minich as a senior, that's the type of guy that makes up for a lot of mistakes defensively and can erase those mistakes, but also allow you to take chances. And ultimately, again, you're running Al Golden's defense, but at the end of the day, Marcus Freeman's the guy up top. And I think that foundationally what he wants in a defense is what we saw at Cincinnati, where Cincinnati could be very aggressive. Why? Because they had a lot of dudes on the back end that could allow their front seven to maybe give some different blitz pressure packages, because they could play man-to-man. They can play single high free safety. They can do a lot of different things. And I think that Ben Minich is one of those kids that the fact that that the role that he could fill is in that free safety role that could play from depth and make some players around him look good at times that maybe make mistakes. I think that is another kind of separator maybe between, a free safety in Notre Dame's defense, boundaries, a field safety versus boundary safety, or free safety versus strong safety, depending on how we're terming those phrases, right? So I just think that the role that Ben Minich plays is also very important and something to consider in that situation.
Absolutely. Ryan, who is your top 5 upside wise on the defensive side of the ball?
So I would have Armel Mukum number 1. And I mean, it's for a lot of the same reasons that you said, right? Like you can't teach.
Real quick, right? It's the Braylon Jaden Greathouse discussion all over again.
Yes. Yep.
We're nitpicking between two very close kids. So you don't have to feel the need to defend it compared to what I said. It's 1-2 versus 1-2. It's Peyton Manning versus Tom Brady, right? I mean,
right.
Who would you rather have, Tom Brady or Peyton Manning? Yes.
Yes. Answer's yes. Yeah.
So yeah,
that's it. Yeah. So
my point is, you can speak freely about your evaluation without feeling like you need to somehow defend it against what I said. That's from it just came across like you were trying to defend it, like, well, here's why I compare. So just speak freely. You don't have to agree with me. Speak freely.
I have no problem speaking freely. Okay, yeah. No, I mean, yeah, Armel Boubacar would be number 1 and 2 for me, for a lot of the same reasons that we already spoke about. I mean, they're in similar packages, 164, 250, 164, 255. I think the growth that I saw with Armel from a first year ever playing football to a second year ever playing football, and still the growth that he can go. Because, I mean, as a senior, I thought one thing about Armel Mukum you saw was there were a little bit of moves that were kind of pressed in there, right? Like, it wasn't perfect all the time, but you saw that the things are starting to click up top to match the physical profile. So he was 1 for me. Boubacar for 2. Similar to the same things that you said about, just you haven't seen enough of Boubacar Traore, but at the end of the day, you can't teach 6'4", 255 with Vines. Like, those things are easy to see. I would have Christian Gray number 3, just because I think that speed did really show up as a senior. And it's an intangible thing. It's not as tangible as saying like height, weight, speed, but it's an intangible to say there is a competitive nature to Christian Gray that, I mean, a lot of corners in the 2023 class and just in general, if I told you, this week you have to play Cornell Tates, this week you have to play Aaron Scott, the next week you have to play Ryan Wingo, and then we're playing Jeremiah McClellan and Jeremiah Love. Like, in those matchups, I think some corners would be like, dang, man, like, can I get a break? Can I get a bye week somewhere in there? Like, that's wild, right? Christian Gray is not that guy. He wants that type of smoke. Like, he wants that. And I think that is a big separator in that upside, is the fact that I don't think that Christian Gray is ever going to back down from those types of conversations. and those types of matchups. So he's 6 foot, runs in the 4.4s, has length. Those are great tangible things. But then that intangible of the competitive nature he has, I think gives him a tremendous upside as a high-level football player. I would have Drake Bowen, number 4, actually. And this one is one of those other ones that's kind of coupled together. You know, I would have Drake Bowen and I would have Jaden Osbury back-to-back 4 and 5 here. Because, again, I think it's just what is your flavor on this, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what is your flavor? Like, is your Mike more important in your defense? Is your Will more important in your defense? So that's kind of why I wanted to have that conversation earlier, is that I think that could Jaden Osbury be more of a playmaker at the next level than Drake Bowen? Yes, it's possible. But when you also have the context of, but playmaker at Mike is going to look different as a playmaker as a Will linebacker. Drake Bowen, I think, is that modern day Mike linebacker where at 6'2", 230 pounds of good weights, you're going to look at him and be like, that kid can run. That kid can rush the passer. He can be an interior blitzer. He can come up on the line of scrimmage at times if you need him to. Like, he's that Swiss Army knife on a defense, similar to what Jaden Osbury could be, but a little bit different, right? Like, I'm not using Osbury as much as a blitzer as I'm using Jaden Osbury. I'm using him more as a passing game weapon. You can match up against running backs out of the backfield, maybe against some tight ends at time, you know, big slots, do all that type of stuff. Like, he can be that overhang defender, but also being able to fit inside to be a Will. So I think I would have Drake Bowen at number 4 and Jaden Osbury number 5. But again, that's one of those other ones where it's just so tightly compact together because they're both playmakers, but they're just playmakers in different ways.
Where do you have Brandon Hillman?
I would have him at probably at the lower end of the 5-star because I agree with you in the sense that there is a lot of 5 stars from an upside grade perspective. I just haven't seen enough of him at safety, you know. And I know you watched the All-Star game that he was in. I didn't get to see the Polynesian.
That didn't factor into it a ton, but yeah.
I just need to see more, to be honest. Like, I mean, I know he's a great athlete. I can see those things, but most of the defensive highlights I've seen it's really exciting. It's him coming up and it's him sticking dudes. That's awesome. But what can he do working from depth as a true safety, right? Like, because if I knew that he was playing Rover from day one, my opinion might change a little bit because, like, I've seen the Rover trades. I've seen those 100%. But what does he look like working from depth? That's a little bit. So
it's more different of what you haven't seen as opposed to something you don't like as much as other guys.
100%.
100%. Makes sense. Makes sense. Where do you have a Don Schuler? Because he was literally one of the hardest kids to grade for me. Because you watch his film, and I'm like, this kid can flat out ball. And this is the fun thing about doing something like this when you put a grade to something. If I was to grade my top 12 based on my gut feeling of who I like and don't like, it would have looked a lot different than what it was. Yep. And Adon's one of those guys. Don Schuler, to me, just strikes me as this guy can flat out ball. Love the kid. But then he ends up being ranked lower in the class. I also want to make sure people understand, if you earn a top 200 to 250 grade for me, you are a starting caliber player to a place like Notre Dame. Yeah. And the example I use is somebody had made the point that they felt like, you know, Menich and Schuler, based on my grade, were depth guys. And they're not. If you're in the top 200 to 250, you're a starting caliber. If you're a depth guy and you're the number 200 player, you're freaking loaded at that position, right? For example, I wouldn't have a Don Schuler or Ben Minich ranked as high as I had Malachi Starks coming out of high school, right? And Malachi would have ranked higher than both of them. But they both would have ranked higher than Christopher Smith, who was the other starting safety coming out of high school. So for Georgia, I should say, where he was coming out of high school. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that if you're a top 200, 250 guy, you got pretty good safeties. Now, I don't want only top 200 guys across the board. But if 200 to 250 are your number 2 and number 3 safeties, you had a pretty darn good safety class. The concern at safety is now you got to start stringing that together. But if you can give me this safety class every year for the next 5 years, Notre Dame's going to be loaded at safety, in my opinion. Yep. That's my view. So just want to make sure we're clear on that. But
I mean, I think we have similar. I think we have a similar viewpoint on Adon. I mean. And I think seeing him down in San Antonio kind of confirmed those things for me as far as my opinion on him. He's just good at everything, man. Like, there's not many holes in him. Like, he's going to be a good player at Notre Dame. I have almost no doubt. I mean, there's obviously always things that can happen. You know, there could be a lack of development or there could be an injury or yada, yada, yada. Like, those things could always happen. But I would be very surprised if Adon Schuler, barring any injury setbacks, isn't a good football player at Notre Dame. And that means a guy that can contribute on special teams. It means a guy that can give you production as far as being a rotational player, and a guy that I think could start at Notre Dame as well at some point during his career. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if, I know he's injured right now, so he's going to miss the spring, but I wouldn't be surprised if Adon Schuler if he was healthy, was a guy that was giving you some reps as a freshman, because he's just a guy that is dependable, and he's a good football player, man. Is he going to be a first-round NFL draft pick? I don't think so, but he's going to be a guy that down the road you're going to be like, man, you remember Adon Schuler played safety at Notre Dame a few years ago? That dude was a good player, man. Like, we undervalued him maybe at times, but he ended up like 200 tackles in his career, 6 interceptions, like just a good football player. Yeah. Like, that's just all it comes down to for me.
I'm going to make a statement. I'm going to make a hot take that I'm curious to get your take on, and we're going to end this part of the show on this. I hope that Adon Schuler and Ben Minich redshirt this year. I normally don't like redshirting skill guys, but theirs is a unique situation because they are more 5-year guys, because they don't necessarily have those elite traits where I think of the type of player those two guys would be as 5th-year guys compared to seniors could be they could end up being really good players at that point in time. So they're actually 2 skill players, and I rarely say this about skill players. They're 2, and the guy that I would say that about on offense is Rico. I actually want Rico to redshirt because I think he's one of the few 5-year receivers where by his senior year, he's stronger. He can end up being a difference maker. So I don't often say that, but I would like to see both of those guys take a red shirt because they're the few skill players I think could be 5-year guys at a place like Notre Dame, in my view.
I think that would be a really good sign on the other side of it, not even for the sake of Adon and for Ben Minich, but also for the sake of that probably tells you that you stayed healthy at safety, and that tells you that you probably got pretty good production at safety. Like, I think that if Adon and Ben Minich are pressed early on into playing a significant role or giving you a decent amount of reps, it means probably something didn't go right. Like right now you're depending on Xavier Watts needs to step up. Ramon Henderson needs to find his role. Maybe a Clarence Lewis moves to safety and gives you some reps there. DJ Brown and
Thomas Harper.
Yeah. Right. And if one of those guys is needed and pressed, it's not so much saying that, it's definitely not a bad thing, because I think both of those guys will be prepared to give you reps in whatever capacity they can. It's just more of, with this safety room where it is, with the question marks that you have, just based upon what the high upside is, if they are pressing the duty, that probably means that maybe someone didn't develop properly. Maybe somebody got injured. Like, it's probably a bad sign if either one of those guys are pressed too early, in my opinion.
Yep, absolutely. So, Ryan, we're going to wrap this up. We talked about the class rankings. We want to kind of get into, you guys broke down a lot of the linebackers on Monday, and it was very, very well done. And we've seen several offers go out to linebackers since then. I have to say, this is the oddest recruiting strategy. They're going to set a record for linebackers offered in this class. It is really bizarre. I have to just comment on this. We were never planning on talking about this one super long. I don't understand their strategy at linebacker recruiting right now. It's like Al Golden's just, because you're seeing all these kids mention Al Golden as being the guy that's offering them. It's like he's spending all his time on offering kids. And it's like, what is your hope that eventually you're going to find one that just loves Notre Dame and is just going to pick you? You know what I mean? If he would spend as much time actually focusing on the top guys as he is just expanding the board bigger than it, is that what you view as putting in work on the recruiting trail, just offering a million kids? It is a strange linebacker recruiting cycle. And I get why they need to expand the board. Things aren't looking as great with Peyton Pierce right now. You lost Darius Hayes. I get it. But at some point in time, you actually got to start zeroing in on the guys you really want. And I just really don't know if I understand the strategy right now. Or I shouldn't say understand it. I don't know what it is right now.
They have 25 guys offered at linebacker in 2023.
That's
and
nuts.
I know there's 3 positions, right? I mean, you have a Mike, you have a Will, and you have a Rover, but still, man.
You're 8 deep everywhere, Ryan, in offers, right? And then 9 at 1. You know what I mean? I don't get it, man. It's just but here's the question. Who do they like?
Yeah, that's a big question because they keep offering. Like, there's definitely been a couple where I'm just like, is that really a guy you need to offer right now? But then there has been a few guys.
Right.
I mean, like Cameron Pruitt from Alabama's a guy where I'm like, yes, offer that kid all day. Braden Platt from Washington was another guy where I was like, that I like that one. Like, he's a talented player. But then there's some other ones where you're just like, why is the energy going there? Why don't you recruit Braden Platt? Why don't you recruit Cameron Pruitt? Why aren't you recruiting? Why aren't you putting more effort into Peyton Pierce? Like that's kind of where my question is like, are you wasting too much effort off of identifying and finding talent? It's like, that's great. That's something that needs to happen, right? Like you need to be able to identify and evaluate and find talent. That's awesome. And they've done that in a lot of instances, but offering a player is not going to land that player at the end of the day. Like that's where the effort comes into. So we have so many questions because, I mean, at the end of the day, you have landed 7 players in the last 2 years and had 2 of the more impressive linebacker groups in back-to-back years in 2022 and 2023. Quickly, that has gone from one of the premier linebacker recruiting teams in the country last 2 years to a complete wild card. I have no idea what's going to happen at linebacker in 2024. Again, a lot of talents. I like it, man. And we talked about that this is the class where at linebacker in 2024, where you have the opportunity to gamble on some traitsy kids, right? Some guys that maybe have high upsides and maybe lower floors. That's awesome. But who are those guys? Like I don't know. I can't answer that one to you. I mean, we know they like Kingston from St. John Bosco. We know they like Peyton Pierce, but otherwise it's just like.
And I think they like Cole Sullivan a lot.
Yeah.
But then I think of like that group together, and I'm like, I don't know how well that trio would fit together. So
it's two Mikes and a Will, and
it's interesting. Yeah. It's very interesting.
Get Cameron Pruitt to Notre Dame though, no matter what.
Yeah.
That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, well, I know they like Tylen Singleton a lot.
Oh yes, him too. Get him too.
He's a rover. He's a rover. But Rover Will type of guy. But are they going to be able to get a kid like that to Notre Dame? We'll find out. I know he likes Notre Dame. You said he likes Notre Dame, but liking Notre Dame and then coming to Notre Dame are 2 completely different animals. So, and I do love the fact that they're dipping back into Louisiana for another athletic linebacker. I'm always a fan of that action. There's no doubt about that. So that's kind of linebacker recruiting. It's going to be interesting to follow how that goes, right? Because I think they faded more than you think they faded with Peyton Pierce, I think, but we may be on the same page on that one, Ryan. And the main reason why is the guy that recruited him is gone.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that Ohio State offered him like 2 days before James Laurinaitis took the job at Ohio State. I don't think that's a coincidence. So we'll see how it pans out. But linebacker recruiting is probably the position I have. I'll be honest, linebacker recruiting and D-line recruiting are 2 huge concerns for me right now. Not just because I don't have a lot of faith in their coaches, but I don't even know who they like right now on the D-line outside of Justin Scott. Like, okay, how hard are they pushing for certain guys? But are they really pushing hard for those guys? I don't really know. Are they, Bryce? I know they like Bryce Young, but are they're not able to get him in the class just yet? Like, there's just a lot of question marks when it comes to front 7 recruiting that makes me a little concerned, and that's just not where you can be, right? That's just not where you should be right now. So we'll see. We'll see if they can get that turned around and get it rolling. So, Ryan, that's going to do it for this portion of the show. It went very long. We'll have to – I think the rankings of the top 12 took a little longer than I thought. So we'll start to zero in on this. It's always going to be a little bit longer of a show in that part, but I think we'll probably narrow it down and just a little bit next time. I think what we should have done is gone the top 12 on offense this week and then the top 12 on defense next week, so you can spend a little bit maybe more time on it. So that's going to do it for this show, folks. But before we leave, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. If you haven't already done so, I'm putting the link in the chat again right now where you can go and you can donate to the GoFundMe for Jade and Mickey's mother, who is battling stage 4 colon cancer. So the family has asked publicly for support. And we know that this is a valid cause, a righteous cause, and so we did our part. I know that I kind of gave a donation on behalf of Irish Breakdown, the employees at Irish Breakdown. So hope that you all, if you're able, are able to take the time and do that today. So we are definitely going to help up. She has to. My understanding, Ryan, is the reason that the number is so big is that it's metastasized. All the treatments where she lives, that her insurance will cover have been exhausted. There's, I believe it's Arizona. There's a special kind of clinic so the family has to relocate to Arizona to be able for her to further fight this. And so we definitely want to step up and help out and do whatever we can. So I want to I want to take that in there as well. And then I make sure that if you're, again, y'all, I understand everybody's in a different circumstance in life. Some of you would love to donate, but you can't because of your own circumstances. I get it. Then what I'll ask you to do is get on your knees tonight and pray for Mrs. Mickey and the family, and that people that can give will step up and give. That's my prayer. That's my wish. I will also be praying for the Mickey family and everyone that believes in the power of prayers. I do. I think that even more than giving your money. So I'm going to give my money, but the most important thing I can give is also prayer, and we'll continue to do that as well. So I want to thank all of you for that. And there's something that Katie Keever said too, Ryan, a hot take segment in one of our shows would be good. That might be something that'd be perfect for this Wednesday show. I think it'd be a really, what's our hot take of the week? That'd be really fun to do. I think that'd be a lot of fun. So anyway, that's going to do it. We're going to have a mailbag next, so don't go away yet, but subscribe, notification bell, share the podcast, give us a 5-star review, and of course, sign up for the boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We do have some mailbag questions, Ryan, and Sean S. got this super chat up before the beginning. So Sean, you don't have to apologize for giving us a super chat, man. You gave the super chat before we said anything, so you are all good, man. He did apologize for this, but we appreciate you. Sean's question, Ryan, is if Jadarian Price is back to 100% or close to it, what are your expectations for him in 2023?
I mean, I expect him to compete to be that third volume getter in the backfield. I mean, because I think when you look at, you feel really good about where you are with Logan Diggs and Audrey Estime. Those guys ended the season at a very high tick, and they were the volume getters down the stretch. And then there's Chris Tyree, who I think is going to be utilized hopefully in a much better manner in 2023 compared to what he was in 2022. But there is room to mix and match those styles a little bit, because one thing that Jadarian Price brings to the table is he's an explosive kid. He's got ability as a home run hitter, but he also has that versatility aspect to him where, like, you could play a little bit of, you could do some stuff in space. You can catch the football a little bit out of the backfield. You can do a lot of variable things that are a little bit of a different package as far as the size profile. So if Jadarian Price is fully healthy and ready to go, I expect him to compete heavy for some touches in that backfield to potentially be that third volume getter. I think that he has that type of upside, and he brings a different dynamic that you need more of in that backfield, in my opinion.
I like to refer to him as an every down home run hitter, right? Like that's how I would describe Jadarian Price. So yeah, we're on board. See, close to 100%, not yet. No, an Achilles injury is almost a year thing now, Ryan. I mean, it's close to that now. So I've seen in some of the workout videos, he's usually just standing around the back. So I don't think he's like in full participation. I do know he's moving around, he's running and stuff, but I don't think he's 100% cleared right now. And I doubt that we see a lot of him this spring. I could be wrong. That is not giving you intel. That's not giving you a medical that's just me, my opinion based on what I know of Achilles injuries in the time frame. I personally, just Brian Driscoll's opinion, would be a little surprised if he was going full. I expect him to go through some drills, but I don't expect to see him team. I don't expect to see him really in 7-on-7. I don't expect to see him in a whole lot of things other than just drills. Right at this point in time.
Did he hurt himself late in spring, or was it in fall last year that he hurt himself?
It was in the summer.
It was in the summer.
It was like,
gotcha.
Yeah, it was like June, July-ish.
Gotcha.
So like in between the two. Yeah, he never made it to fall camp, but he made it through the whole, because remember he had that long touchdown in the spring game.
Yes.
He had that 50-yard touchdown pass in the spring game. So it was like June or July. I actually can look it up while we're talking, Ryan, but yeah, it was June or July. Yeah. And then we had another super sticker down here from let me find it here. We had one from, where is it? From Aaron Schmidt. Aaron, thank you very, very much. We appreciate that. And then we did have another super chat from ERO 5.20. Says, oh, no, I'm sorry. It was from Brian Pinocchio. I know the O-line hire will be Parker and Freeman's, but do you think they will want to wait till Gino is a Notre Dame official for his input as well? I'll answer this one, Ryan. Gino doesn't need to be officially hired at Notre Dame to have input on an offensive line hire.
Yeah,
he doesn't. They'll be able to communicate with him. It's not like a recruiting thing where you can't have a phone call with him or something like that. So if Coach Gaduli has accepted the job and they're just going through the background checks or whatever. He's accepted the terms to his contract. It's just about getting through the background check, which is just how Notre Dame is. He's going to have input on things. There's no doubt about it. So will he have some input? I mean, I'd want to hear input from all the coaches. Yes. Hey, do you guys know the guy? Do you know? Here's what I'm asking every assistant coach. If I have a guy that I'm bringing in for an interview, I will have already asked all of my assistants, Coach McCullough, Coach Stuckey, Coach Parker, Coach Gaduli, do you know him? Question number one. If you did, what are your thoughts? Number two is, do you know anyone that you respect who's worked with him? Call them. Get their opinion. Those are the two things I'm asking these guys to do. And I'll take their input. Will it be a decision maker for me? A deal breaker for me? It depends on how bad the story is, but in most instances, no, it's just part of the evaluation process for me. So that's how that one works there. All right, next question. John A1 says, who is the O-line coach candidate who projects to be the best to continue Notre Dame tradition of being O-line U? We addressed this a little bit during the show, Ryan. There's not one, but I'll say you need to get a guy that does this, but I don't think there's just one guy to me that projects to be that guy, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree. I think that there's a few people that we've kind of seen, just kind of mentioned in closer circles that I would be very excited about. I mean, I think that the intangible part of them as coaches does need to be similar to your points. You need to have a guy that believes in technical refinement. You need to be a guy that believes in the physicality of the position and to really mirror you don't have to teach it exactly like what Coach Heathstan did, but you have to believe in the same philosophy, right? The same ideals in what you let in the offensive line. Because I think that is something that the offensive staff and the staff in general is going to be something that's consistent and something that they believe in. So you need those ideals in them. But I mean, again, there's going to be a lot of names thrown out there. And I mean, we'll get into those names as they come out and they surface, but I don't think it's one guy. I think it's just more, do they fit this profile and are they a good enough coach and a good enough recruiter to continue to develop what has been a tradition at Notre Dame to be one of the better offensive lines of college football.
Right. And some of the guys will be sexy and some of the guys won't. And I think and what is that determined by, Ryan? Where he came from. And there's going to be, hey, this guy came from this really good school. He must be the best. Maybe he is. But there's other guys, like, here's a name that's out there, so we'll put this out there. It's like Brian Callahan from Minnesota. I don't know if Notre Dame is looking at him, but, like, he probably wouldn't be a super sexy hire unless people are just the football junkies. But then you look at what he's done with the offensive line in Minnesota, and you're like, he's done pretty good with the talent he has had.
All the Callahans, man. All the Callahans.
Right. And so you have to look at that more so than the name. Now, sometimes it can be both. It can be a flashy hire that is also a really darn good coach. That would be the ideal for me. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is get a guy that can coach this group to a very, very high level. That's the key. Next question here, Ryan, is this one right here from John A1. We'll get two from John A1 and then roll to the next. The talent of the defensive roster is young, and it is a fresh start for the defensive staff. Which defensive assistant makes the biggest jump in production with their group? That's a good question.
That is a good question. I mean, I think it comes down to biggest jump. I mean, my mind went right to which one of the Owls is the guy that takes their position to the next level, right? I mean, it would be – I mean, I guess I always lean towards the defensive line because I think that – look, the linebackers have to get better, right? Like, it was just not great last year. Like, I think just by law of averages, like, the linebackers have to get a little bit better. But the defensive line was one of, like, the bigger – disappointments for me in 2022. It was like, was it a bad unit? No. Was it a great unit? Also no. Like, it was solid to good at times, right? But I think that spot is, I think that I have more optimism to what the defensive line could be than what just some general Notre Dame fans do out there from the conversations I've seen. But if you take that defensive line and you get the best out of guys like Jordan Botelho and Joshua Burnham and some of the interior defensive linemen, Gabriel Rubio, Howard Cross using it in a specific role, Riley Mills. Like, if you get the best out of that group and you turn them into a really good unit, I think that then you're talking about, like, man, if you have that type of pass rusher and that type of potential to create havoc in the backfield on top of having the secondary that Notre Dame should have in 2023, then you're cooking with grease, in my opinion. So I guess I would say Al Washington by default. Like, that's a guy that, you have talent to work with. There's some question marks, but can you get the most out of that defensive line room in 2023? Because there's a lot of questions to answer.
From a pure production standpoint, I hope it's linebacker, because the production they had last year was more so from tackles for loss and things like that. That was not an overly productive group. Because I don't really care about production from a tackle standpoint, Ryan. I care about impact production, right? And that's the big thing for me. And that needs to make a big jump. But to your point, if one of the two front seven groups makes a big jump, that's great. If the pass defense doesn't improve a lick next year, but the front seven takes a big jump, Notre Dame's defense will take a big jump, because the pass defense was still pretty good last year. For all the flack people give about the safeties and this guy's this, and the safety play last year was pretty solid all year. It really was. You had a game here, game there, play here, play there. But overall, it was pretty solid. And the cornerback play was excellent after the Ohio State game. I mean, they didn't really start getting beat against North Carolina until the game was out of question. I mean, the game was basically over when North Carolina hit a couple big plays. So it's the front seven, big time.
No.
Here's the last one, right? This is from John A1. Does Preston Zinner have the talent to play tight end at Notre Dame? If so, what would his floor ceiling grade be on offense? So let's say we found out he was going to flip, Ryan, for that second part. Where would his grade be for that position?
I mean, John, I think the first and foremost is, does he have the talent to play that spot? I actually think he does, to be honest. I mean, he's a really good tight end in high school, man. I mean, he's a kid that's 6'3", maybe some change there. He's got good length of position. I think he's got a body where if he's playing tight end rather than a linebacker role, or even if eventually he's playing Viper, he can hold 240, like 245, somewhere in that ballpark. He can have a Kane Barong type of physical profile. He'd be more of an H-back than a true inline style tight end. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know what the upside would – I'm trying to work through my minds here because, again, I think that he definitely has the traits to play it. I think that for me, he has the ability at tight end to be a good part of a tight end room, right? Like, I don't think he's ever going to be like that true inline tight end. That's your number one. But as a complementary piece in a passing game, I think that he could be that type of guy. I really do. I mean, he's got skills, man. He looks good with the ball in his hands. He really does.
Formationally and route concepts wise, a lot of the stuff that Georgia does with goodness gracious, I'm drawing a blank. Brock Bowers to me is how you'd use him. Now, look, he's not as good as Brock Bowers because he's not as athletic and explosive, but I'm saying how they use him from a formational standpoint and the specific route concepts they use him, that's how I think I would use a guy like Preston Zinner. So just hear what I'm saying. Not saying he's as good as Brock Bowers, because if he was, I'd say move him to tight end right now. Yeah. I'm simply as far as usage type. That's because Brock Bowers doesn't do a lot of inline blocking, Ryan. He'll block on the wing, he'll block on the edge, he'll kind of go backside.
Does a lot of stock blocking.
Yeah. And I think Preston could be a better blocker as getting to the backside on split zone, things like that. Motioning and then getting himself position to kind of hook, to kind of reach an edge on some outside zone. Those are all things I think you could use him to do. And then of course downfield blocking, but route pass game wise, a lot of the things that Georgia does with from the intermediate game, formationally and pass game wise, are things that I think if you want to know what type of player could be, it's that type of role. He just wouldn't be as impactful at it as him. But yes, he could be a number 2, maybe even a starting tight end down the road for Notre Dame, in my opinion. He just wouldn't be quite as impactful at it as I think he could be a linebacker, in my opinion. This is a comment from Connor O'Doherty, Ryan. He says, also super excited about Parker. Hopefully he can run an offense that could score 35 to 40 points against the elite teams. I mean, against elite teams, if you're scoring 35 to 40, that's pretty flipping good. I think that the key is you got to get into the 30s, though, in most instances, right? But it doesn't always require that. Like, look, you needed to score 38 plus to beat USC last year. You only needed 23 to beat Ohio State. Right? You only needed 24 to beat Georgia in 2019. You only needed 21 to beat Georgia in 2017. It's just you got to score enough to beat those teams. That's the key, Connor. And sometimes that's going to – you needed 31 to beat Clemson in 2018, right? You needed a little bit more to beat them in the ACC title game 2 years later. You needed to get closer to 40 the way that game went out. So It varies, but the point is you've got to be able to step up and play your part in those big games. And Notre Dame, I mean, what you got 14 points in the title game in 12, and 7 of those came late. You scored 17. You scored 19 points against Georgia in 2017. You scored 8 against Miami that year in 2017. In 2018, you scored, was it 3 points against Clemson in the playoff game? In 2019, you scored 17 points on the road against Georgia. You scored 14 against Michigan in that loss. In 2020, you scored 14. Was it 14 or 10 against Clemson in the ACC title game? I'm drawing blanks today, Ryan, on some of these minor details. I don't know if maybe I didn't get enough sleep last night like I thought I did. It was 10. Yeah, they scored 10 against them, against Clemson. Then only 14 against Bama in that next game. And then this year they scored 10 against Ohio State in that loss. So in most games, they haven't done enough offensively. Now this year, they played much better against Clemson this year. Now, I had help from the defense and special teams. Not going to take away from that. But I think Notre Dame scores 24 to 27 points against Clemson if they don't have those things. I think they probably would have punched another touchdown or maybe a couple field goals into the end zone if they didn't have the lost possessions from the block punt in it. Because Clemson could not stop Notre Dame's run game. Just couldn't.
Yeah.
So they haven't even come close to being good enough on offense in those games. So yeah, they're a long way away from that, from what they've been. But that's the key. That's where this offense has got to get to, right? I don't care if you score 60 on Tennessee State next year. How much are you going to score this year? Like 23. How much are you going to score against Ohio State? How much are you going to score at NC State? How much are you going to score against USC and Clemson? That matters a whole lot to me than what your average is, because you could, like in 2019 is a perfect example, Ryan. They averaged 36 points a game in the regular season, almost 37. But they scored 17 on the road against Georgia and 14 against Michigan. Why was their stat so good? Because they scored 66 against New Mexico, scored 52 against Bowling Green, 52 against Navy, 45 against Stanford, 40 against Boston College, 38 against Duke, teams that sucked. But they averaged 15.5 points in their 2 losses. So I don't care that you rack up your point total against teams that suck. You got to be able to score points against the good teams. That's what matters for Notre Dame.
Well, I'm tired of the offense being the what if, what if that offense could just do that, then maybe Notre Dame could win a national championship. Maybe they could have beaten this team, that team. And at the end of the day, man, I don't want there to be excuses anymore. I feel like the offense was always an excuse for the last few years. It's like, oh, the offense just isn't good enough. It's what if. At the end of the day, man, this offense needs to catch up to what Notre Dame has had defensively pretty consistently throughout the years. It hasn't been perfect every year, but for the most part, the defense has been up to caliber. It's been up to being in the ballpark with those elite teams. It's the offense that has fallen short. And, right. That is the challenge that's in front of Coach Parker and this offensive staff, man, is that in those biggest contests, and to Connor's point here, you need to step up to the table and you need to be the reason that they win, not the reason that you don't win the football game. So that's what's in front of them, man, because, again, we can harp on what they look like against Navy or when they look against one of these lower teams. At the end of the day, when you get into those big games with those environments where it's just, it's not advantageous to being successful, that's when you really need to play your best football and you need to fight adversity. And I think that's what offense has struggled with over the last few years. It's like when that adversity hits, I just feel like they just kind of give into it, right? And then they aren't able to counter back and they are not able to punch a little bit. And in 2023, you have a good quarterback. It's not going to be an excuse anymore. You have a pretty veteran-laden offensive line. You have a talented group of receivers. You have some really good running backs. There's no excuse to go out against an Ohio State and lay a goose egg offensively this year. There just isn't. There just really is not. Because even if you lose, God forbid it, even if Sam Hartman gets banged up for a couple games, having Tyler Buckner come in, dude, that's just where we are.
No
man.
excuses. No excuses. You nailed it, Ryan. No excuses. It really is as simple as that. You have no excuses anymore.
None.
All right. Connor O'Doherty also says, so excited for the running back room this year. Do you think, guys, do you guys think that Notre Dame could legitimately play 5 backs, estimate Diggs, Tyree, Price, and Love? I'll give my quick answer, Ryan. Yeah. Not on a consistent basis, no. That's too many backs. I think if you're going to play all 5 of those guys, you have to find other roles for them. Make Jeremiah Love your punt returner. Make Jeremiah Love your kick returner. Find other ways to get them touches, and then, maybe work them into a package here and there, but I'm getting those guys in the game in the third quarter if I'm up big. If I'm up 35-3 on the team in the late in the third quarter, I'm giving Jeremiah or Jadarian snaps with the ones for a series or two, and I'm taking some of the pounding off of Audric and Logan flat out. But it's hard, Ryan, in a normal rotation to get 5. It's hard to get 4. It's not easy to get 3 backs involved. It's really hard to get 4, and it's almost impossible to get 5 unless you're just killing everybody at 50 points. That's the only way you can really get a 5 guys play every week.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say basically the same thing, is that if you're going to get that many guys, you're going to have to figure out ways to implement them in the football game. And that could be special teams. That could be specialized role. It could be a game where, maybe there's a little bit of a load management on Audric against this team, right? Because you maybe don't need him as much. So then
he doesn't need 20 carries against Tennessee State.
Exactly. So Tennessee State, maybe Jeremiah Love gets 5 to 6 carries. Maybe Jadarian Price carries the load in the second half, whatever it might be, right? Like you need to pick and find your spots with them. But again, Connor, I think it comes down to, like, when you're saying, could you get 5? You could legitimately play 5 backs. Yes, if it's in the right type of circumstance, right? Like if you're playing 3 backs and maybe sprinkling in a 4th occasionally, but then one of the running backs is your main punt and kick returner, you played 5 backs. It might not be as a running back, but you did play 5. And I really do think at the end of the day, Jeremiah Love is the type of kid that you need to get on the field in some capacity. Like, again, he's not going to be the main ball carrier this year. He's not going to get a ton of snaps at running back, barring some injuries, most likely. But that kid is too dynamic to not get on the field in some capacity. So whether that is as a kick returner, make it happen, because I just don't see him personally as a 5-year guy. I just don't see it. So redshirting is not going to do much with Jeremiah Love, in my opinion.
Agree. And then the other thing is save the red shirt if he gets injured. Like that's my thing. Yeah. You nailed that, Ryan. Estimate Trucking LLC asks, in your opinion, who was the better prospect coming out of high school, Elijah Shoemate, Adon Schuler, or DJ Brown, and then rate them 1 to 3?
I didn't see Elijah or DJ out of high school, so yeah.
I'll answer this one then. Yeah. If we're going to go on current grade, it's Adon, Elijah, and then DJ is a distant third. I had Elijah as a 4-star player. I liked Elijah coming out. Elijah was more of an upside guy, though. He was still kind of raw. He was an alley player. Honestly, in today's – and if Elijah Shoemate played in Notre Dame today, I think he'd probably be more of a rover than he was as a safety. He was a thumper. He was a downhill thumper. So I'd have him number 2. I think Adon has a little bit more versatility to his game. Elijah couldn't cover, and that was the big knock on him. And you saw that in the Alabama game. And that was you had 2 game plans. One is we got to figure out a way to establish a run game, and we're going to attack 22 on defense with our tight ends and backs. That's what they did, and it worked. So it would be Adon, Elijah, and DJ. No question. Yeah.
Well, so your top 2 guys are both New Jersey guys, huh?
Which I figured you'd like that. Yeah. Coleman Smith, do both of you think Notre Dame will ever finish number 1 in the recruiting rankings based on points, since there's an obvious bias?
It's going to be hard. I mean, it really is going to be hard, just mostly because, and we've talked about this, there's layers to this conversation, right? Like there's big layers. Is that one of the biggest hurdles to getting that number 1 recruiting class is that we know that there is a bias against Notre Dame commits, right? So the minute a guy comes to the class, usually they either say stagnant on a recruiting ranking perspective or they take a dip. That's just kind of the trend that happens. So, I mean, early on in 2023 and 2024 even, like at some points you're like, oh man, if they continue this trend and, they get a couple of those big guys on the board, like they might be in a good spot. But like at the end of the day, you know that CJ Carr is going to dip in the rankings. Like, it's going to happen, man. Like it's a foregone conclusion. He's a 5-star. I think most people consider him a 5-star level player. But at the end of the day, he's probably not going to be rated as a 5-star when it's all said and done, just because him being committed to Notre Dame for so long. So I think that bias is going to prevent it a little bit. I mean, and ultimately, there's going to be some teams that, like the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world that can offer other things. And at the end of the process, they're going to be able to pull in the
always
5-star players.
And that was true before NIL. The other thing too, Ryan, for me is when I look at this as well, I think it's not even the anti-Notre Dame bias that we've discussed that is even the concern for me. It's more so the regional bias that in most instances, you're going to see a much bigger here's an example, and I've talked about this. I'm going to probably do an article about it at some point in time. I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to get to it, but the number of kids from Florida and Texas that are in the top 300s of these services is significantly greater than the number of kids from those states that get drafted and that become all pros. Because yes, the best players come from those states. They do. But the discrepancy of how many get ranked there compared to actually how many pan out is higher. And you see kids from states that nobody follows that get drafted because recruiting services don't go there. They don't do what Tom Lemming does, which is literally spend like 6 months on the road getting out to see every single kid he possibly can. They don't do that anymore. It's like, oh, this camp or that camp or whatever. And so that's also factors into it, Ryan, for me is that regional bias that is also built in hurts them as well. Even if Notre Dame is winning national championships, I don't think we're going to see them finish with the number one class. I don't. I think they can get close, though. I do. I think they could get close. And you look at this past year. If they would have got the guys that we think they could have got, I look at it and I'm actually trying to go in now and figure this out. But like if they would have got Keon and Peyton Bowen and Dante and then not got Kenny Minchie, their grades at 298.59, that would have ranked them. Let me see here. Let's go 23 rankings. This is on 247. That would have ranked them fourth. Like, are you really going to tell me that Texas's class would have been better than Notre Dame's if they'd have got Keon, Peyton, and Dante Moore? No way. I would say that Bama's the only one even in the conversation, in my opinion, being better than Notre Dame if they got those three. But why is that the case? Because too many Southern kids get ranked too high. Now, again, am I saying the best players aren't by percentage in the South? They are. There's no disputing that. But instead of like, let's say 40% or 60% of your players in the rankings being from the South, you've got 70, 75. That's my point. And I'm not saying those are specific numbers. I'm just giving you numbers for an example. Is there's too many of those kids in the rankings, which is going to do what? It's going to boost the rankings of the Southern schools, right? And so that's kind of where I'm coming from on this one. All right. Coleman Smith with a question here, Ryan, another one. He says, how does an offensive coordinator find time to coach their position in practice since they have time to spend installing game plan and looking at the offense as a whole? I mean, this is an easy one. You have individual periods.
Yep.
And even when you're coaching the entire offense, you're still watching your players and you're still going to have individual meetings with your players. There's team meetings or unit meetings where the offense as a whole meets. And then there's individual position meetings, and in those individual position meetings, you're still going to meet with your tight ends. So it's no different than how does the quarterbacks coach quarterbacks, or how does in college football coordinators coach their position. I mean, and there's a lot of individual time geared towards those reps where you don't have to float. You can coach a position during that time.
And the game planning stuff is done, with the other coaches in between practices or during the weekend or, Sundays or Monday afternoons, whatever it might be. Like they find time for when the game planning is revolved around the rest of the team activities. I think you said it perfectly for the practices. Like practices is not just them going team, going team the whole practice, right? There are individual opportunities, there are group opportunities, or inside run, outside run, 7-on-7. Like there's also some opportunities in practice where you have joint opportunities between position groups that help a lot too, to ease some of the stress of coaching one position all the time. So yeah, there's a way to work around it, especially with the practice structures.
Yep. Next question is from Anthony Manzano, who says he is a Notre Dame and a Miami Hurricane fan. I don't know how that's possible. He says, what are your predictions for Sam Hartman this year in terms of his production? So
interesting question.
For me, I've said minimum 3,500 yards passing. I'd say closer to like 37 is what I think we could see from him. 30 plus touchdowns is where I'm. Look, he's not going to throw for 4,200 yards like he did in 2021. Notre Dame's offense isn't geared towards that because they're going to run a lot more effectively. Could he get to 40 touchdown passes? Maybe, but I don't. I don't think he's going to have the production at Notre Dame that he had at Wake Forest, Ryan, from a yards and touchdown standpoint. But I think what you're going to see from him is a much better overall play and greater efficiency. You know, so you're talking about a guy that completed 63% of his passes this past year. He was at 59 the year before that. I expect him to be 65 plus. You know, I think he could come close to this year's production, Ryan, but in the additional games. He was 3,700 yards passing this year, and he had 38 touchdowns. He had 39 total touchdowns. Last year, he had 51. He had 50 total touchdowns. This year, he was at 37, so a little over 3,800 yards of total offense and 39 touchdowns. But that was only 12 games. I could easily see him doing that in the regular season this year as well. I mean, I think that's close. He's not going to produce like he did the year before, in my opinion. But cut down on the interceptions, up the completion percentage, and a little bit higher yards per attempt is what I think we'll see from him, as opposed to jumps and yards and touchdowns.
What's the Notre Dame touchdown pass record in the season? Is it Brady with like 32, right? Something like
that?
No.
He threw 32 in 2005, but he threw I think 37. I'm looking at it right now. I think
I think you're right.
He threw more in 2006 than he threw in 2005. He threw 37 in 2006, 32 in 2005.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then Ian Book threw 34 in 2019.
Yeah.
I think it's like 19 of them were in like 4 games. It's like New Mexico, Bowling Green, Navy, Duke, and 5 games in Stanford. He had
they all count. They all count, man.
But I care more about what you do in the big games.
He's the most winning quarterback in Notre Dame history as well.
You're just trying to piss me off today. I see what you're trying to do. I
just see it on Twitter all the time. So, you know.
Exactly.
The most winning quarterback in Notre Dame history is playing in the Super Bowl.
The Eagles would have played Ian Book instead of Jalen Hurts, man. That's all Ian does.
They would have won, man. They would have won. Yeah.
Bailey Brad with a question. Is there interest from Freeman and Parker to bring in a great recruiter on the O-line, or are they more focused on other attributes? Ryan, I think we discussed this earlier. The recruiting aspect is important, but to me, it's bottom of the list of the important things for me. Because O-line, more than any other position, what you produce is more important than what you do on the recruiting trail as far as the work. They got to have a relationship with you, but if you are Harry Hiestand does not grind the way that other O-line coaches do. Why is he so successful? He has a plan. He's honest. He finds kids he likes, but it's like, what's your recruiting pitch? I'm unrolling like a scroll, right, of all the guys he's had drafted in the first round in the last decade. You know what I mean? Like, that's my recruiting pitch. That matters to me at every position, but I think it's even more important from an offensive line standpoint, because you don't have to be a great recruiter as a receivers coach if your offensive coordinator is putting up monster numbers with his offense, right? O-line, it's more about what have you done in producing big-time offensive lines and linemen. I think it's more as important as any position, in my opinion, if not more so, other than maybe quarterback.
Well, the good thing is that the pitch still stays the same, right? It's not from a one-to-one as far as Harry Hiestand could say, I coached all these guys, but I mean, the new offensive line coach is going to be like, this is what Notre Dame produces at the offensive line position. Like, that doesn't go away. Like, that is historically ingrained in this program. So I think that I don't think recruit. And look, I'm gonna pull back a little bit to what I was about to say, because I was going to be way too hyperbolic with it. You have to be a good recruiter at offensive line as a head coach at Notre Dame, but it's not the hardest position to recruit at Notre Dame. Let's put it like that, right? I mean, offensive linemen are attracted to Notre Dame. I mean, I've talked to several in 2024 that, like, the minute Notre Dame offered, it's like, wow, that's Notre Dame, man. Like, it's Notre Dame, right? I'm an offensive lineman and Notre Dame just offered me. Like, that's wild. I mean, I remember when I talked to Caleb Brewer, he's like, that was like, whoa, man. Like, you want me? Like, I'm an offensive lineman good enough to play at Notre Dame? That's wild, right? So, yeah, I think developer, technical side of things, those things are definitely more important, but you can't be a bad recruiter, obviously.
Right. Right. That's what we said. It's an important characteristic, but it's the bottom of the important characteristics for me.
It's fair. It's fair.
Next question is from Archer452. The early win total line for Notre Dame is set at 9. Are you taking the over or the under?
It's 9 flat. It's not like 9.5 or anything. It's just 9.
I'm not sure. I haven't looked at it, but I'm going to give Archer the benefit of the doubt and say that is true.
Interesting.
Definitely not taking the under. I would either right now I would take the over or push. Those are the two things I would do. But I'm definitely not taking.
I would take the over in that one. Yeah. Curious, man. They don't usually make over unders like flat on the number like that. Usually it's like something and a half. You know what I mean? So interesting. But yeah, sure. I would still go over.
ERO 5.20 says, I'm assuming this has been asked before, but what do you make of the new O-line offers on the O-line? Was there a reason these players didn't already have offers? Yeah, the reason was simple. Harry Hiestand didn't like him as much.
Yes.
I mean, it's just plain and simple,
Yep.
right?
And
Coach,
yeah.
go ahead,
No, I was just going to say, I have a article that's going to kind of talk about that a little bit. I mean, again, like you're talking about guys like Andrew Sprague, guys like Brandon Baker out in modern day in California. Like those are guys that obviously there was some people on the staff that did like those players, and maybe that Coach Easton just didn't like them nearly as much as some people on the staff did. So, I mean, that's where it comes down to. And I do think that there's going to be, and this is also obviously going to depend on who the offensive line coach is, but I do think there could be a little bit of a different kind of look to how offensive line recruiting works here moving forward. Because one thing about Coach Easton, was a good recruiter, but he was incredibly particular and he kept very small boards. Do you start expanding that a little bit? Do you start offering more players, casting a slightly wider nets? You know, I mean, I think that it was, and this is just my opinion, I think it was a mistake that Brandon Baker and Andrew Sprague were not offered by Notre Dame yet. I think that was a mistake. That's just my opinion. I think it was a mistake.
We love Coach Easton. He was great at what he did, but he's not infallible.
No.
I mean, it's not infallible.
I mean, because
and I'll say this: the fact that he left after 1 year, and this isn't a criticism of Coach Easton. The fact that he was basically going to leave when Tommy left tells me he didn't have the same level of investment in bringing these kids in as he did in the past. Now, the class was still very good. But you and I have talked before, Ryan, like, man, they're not throwing a lot of offers out. We understood why to a degree because it's not a great O-line class. But there were some guys you're like, why doesn't this kid have an offer already? You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially Sprague, that's right there in Missouri. It's just like that would be a kid that, like, even if you don't end up taking him, like,
I get Baker at modern day. Like, dude, what are the odds you get a kid from modern day?
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
Like, I get that one. I'm cool with that one. But like, I didn't understand that one. I understood Ian Moore not having an offer. I'm okay with that. And I'm still okay with that. I don't love Ian Moore as a player. He's a good player, don't get me wrong, but he's a guard, and they need to focus on bringing in more tackles because they've signed a lot of guards in the last couple. You could make a case that in the last two classes, Ryan, 4 of the 5 signees in both of the last 2 years' classes were better suited playing inside than at tackle. You could make that case.
You could, yeah. Yeah, there was just a couple head scratchers. I'm just like, why did it take that kid so long to get offered, right? Like Andrew Sprague. Grant Bricks was a guy that was offered while Coach Easton was still there, but he was another kid that's like, he's right in Iowa. Why was he not a kid that was offered? And he had a really nice offer list already before Notre Dame offered. Just, yeah, there's just maybe a little bit of a wider net might be a different kind of ideology to how offensive line recruiting happened. But we'll see. We'll see who the next offensive line coach is, obviously.
Yep. Next question is from Patrick Bird. Do you see Parker coaching from the booth or field? My guess would be, Ryan, he'll be on the field, especially since you have a quarterbacks coach. Normally, the way it works in a situation like this is you'll have the OC and the quarterbacks coach up in the booth, or the OC will be down on the field if he's a field guy, and then the OC is kind of your eyes in the sky. That would be my prediction. I don't know for a fact, but that would be my prediction, that he'll be on the field and he'll have Coach Gaduli, and maybe one other assistant up in the booth with the GAs. That would be my guess.
I definitely want Gino up top because, I mean, him is obviously specializing in the passing game side of things. Like, that's the vantage point I want him to see, right? Like, no doubt about it. I don't know 100% where Parker's going to be, but one thing I know is that I need Gino up top. I need him up top.
Right. Clay Murphy says, where would you rank Harry among Notre Dame's all-time O-line coaches? I can only rank guys that I've seen or guys that I knew about in my lifetime, and he's probably number 2 behind Joe Moore, probably for me. Look, it's simple. Joe has a ring, and Coach Easton doesn't. I mean, that's – now, I think Harry was a much better recruiter. Joe Moore did no recruiting at Notre Dame. Vinny did all his recruiting, none. And I think that hurt Notre Dame at times as well, Ryan, because you're getting guys that Vinny wants, not necessarily guys that the O-line coach wanted. And I think that was it. So, I mean, that's to me where you could maybe make a case that Coach Easton was number 1. But, I mean, the trophy's named after Joe Moore. I mean, it's kind of
it's a pretty good indicator of how good he was, right?
Yeah, and they have a national title. So, I mean, that's what gives them the edge. But if somebody wanted to make a case for Coach Easton, I wouldn't argue with him too harshly.
Nah, I mean, he's tremendous, man. I mean, what he did at Notre Dame it speaks for itself. But At the end of the day, man, it's like Brian. It's like arguing against all-time great coaches. It's like Vince Lombardi has a trophy named after him. That's a pretty important
Right.
trophy.
He's pretty good.
Yeah,
He's pretty
exactly.
good. Yeah, he's pretty good. All right. Scott L says, is there any reason for optimism that Golden or Washington will coach the whole depth charts this year? I'm in with when it comes to Al Washington and Al Golden and everything that they're doing, I'm in 100% show me mode. I don't care what they say or do. I need to see it. We had another question down here too about Al Washington and Al Golden. It said, has the recruiting effort gotten better on the D line and linebackers? At what point in the cycle will it be clear things have not improved and changes must be made? I mean, look, I guess I'd say Al Golden is at least spending more time making offers.
He's more active.
I guess that's better.
He's more active,
in that regard. But is he recruiting harder? Not really. Here's the thing that's frustrating about Al Golden. Al Golden's a very good recruiter.
Yeah,
his issues have nothing to do with ability. It's about effort, and I say effort. It's about priority. Do you think it's a priority to get on a recruiting trail? Right now he hasn't shown that really, and so that's the concern. I don't think Al Washington's issue is so much about effort. It's just about poor planning and just not focusing on the right guys. And I mean, there's kids will talk to like, hey, I love Coach Al Washington. We have a great relationship. It's like, yeah, but that's not the guy you should have a great relationship with. You need to have a great relationship with that guy. You know what I mean? And so those are some of the issues that I have with this recruiting.
It's weird with Al Washington too, because I think Al Washington's another one of those guys where he does talk to kids and he does develop relationships with kids. It's just like, does he do too many kids? Like that's my biggest thing.
He can't close.
Right.
He can't close at all.
Like why? Like we go back to that whole conversation, but like, why are you talking to Justin Scott once every 2 weeks? Like, are you allocating too many times to other kids? Like, you have to prioritize kids at some point. Like, that's got to be a thing.
Yeah. Somebody asked if Al Golden is lazy. It's not about laziness. It's about priorities.
Yes.
Al Golden's not sitting at home eating Cheetos, throwing down Mountain Dews while everybody else is recruiting. He's just, to me, focused on things that aren't like, scheme and this and film and all this. And those things are important, but you've got to be able to prioritize in college. You got to be able to do all those things in college as a coordinator. He doesn't even have to recruit the way that he doesn't. I'm not asking to be Marcus Freeman. You got to put in more work than what you're doing, and you got to be willing to battle. And that's, that's my issue. And Brent Binkley said Ian Moore's committed to Ohio State to play tackle, and Notre Dame has offered him 4 months after he committed to the Buckeyes. I don't care where Ohio State wants to play him. I don't care. He's not a tackle at the next level, at the level that Notre Dame needs. I just don't think he is. And there's definitely better guys on him. I think he's a guard. He will be a guard at the next level, in my opinion.
I agree. I saw him again, like I saw the film of Ian Moore, thought he was a good player, thought he could be a very good guard at the next level. But again, the issues is that Notre Dame hasn't gotten enough tackles the last 2 years. That's the main issue. It's not an Ian Moore thing. It's the fact that you need to get guys like Gerby Lambert this cycle. Like you need those guys. That's where it is.
Yeah. Next question. So, we have something from Rick Doyle. Has to mention a sales rep said something really cool happened yesterday. A sales rep came to my dealership yesterday. I sat my phone down to talk to him, and I had IB pause. He saw it and said, "I watch IB and LL every day. IB family here in Columbus." I absolutely love that, Rick. That's thank you so much for sharing that story. That is awesome. That is amazing. I really appreciate you saying that. And I appreciate you listening this to your workday. So I appreciate that very much. Very, very much. I'm hoping Ryan and Ange and I we need to go buy a new car because our one car is already dead and the other one's about to die. So it's like, I don't want to go buy a new car, but we have no choice at this point in time. New to us car. And I'm like, man, I hope the dealer at wherever we go listens to the show and likes it. I'm hoping so. Maybe we get a better deal. We shall see. Archer452 says, Ryan, can we get an NFL draft beard from you this year? At the very least, a Ron Swanson mustache. Okay, I'm going to say right now, as the boss, there will be no Ron Swanson mustaches on the show. Okay, beard-wise, Ryan, we were having this conversation last week. Hey, can you grow a beard? And when was the last time you shaved?
Last time I shaved yesterday.
Okay. Can you grow a beard, and will you grow a draft beard?
I can grow a beard. It's not a very attractive beard, but yes, I can grow one. Mustache, I could definitely grow a mustache. There's no doubt. Will I grow a draft beard, Archer? I have to run that by Caitlin Roberts first because she is not the biggest fan of facial hair. So that's that's the main culprit in that situation. And I guess my real question would be, in order for it to be a draft beard, when do I need to start this process, and when do I need to? When am I allowed to shave? That would be my next question.
Say that again.
When do I need to start this process of a draft beard, and when am I allowed to cut it? I assume the day after the draft. My question is, when do I start the draft beard?
I mean, I don't know. How quickly does your beard?
I've never let it go to like full beard before. I've never let it go.
Here's the reality.
Yeah.
It's like me singing. In order to grow a beard, when your wife doesn't like it, like the main reason I grow out beards is because my wife likes facial hair. I personally don't. And so I think it's going to be, look, the super chat's going to have to be pretty big to get him to do something that Caitlin doesn't want him to do. So, I mean, that's the way I look at it, Ryan. So you let me know if the permission comes, and then we'll address all those other things. Well, we're waiting asks, Coney dogs or chili dogs, Ryan?
What's a Coney dog?
It's just a different type of mixture. Or chili dogs is like pure chili. A Coney dog is just a different type of. It's chili-ish.
I'm not really a chili dog person in general, so no to both.
Coney dogs for me. I don't like chili dogs. I like Coney dogs. I very much like Coney dogs. When I was a kid, one of the things my grandma would do, there was a root beer stand down the street from her house, and it was an A&W. I think it was an A&W root beer stand. I could be wrong on that, but they had she'd get me root beer floats, and they had these Coney dogs. Like, they seemed like they were huge when I was a kid. I don't think they were like that big, but it was best Coney dog I ever had was those. So we went through a period of time in my life, Ryan, where we were very, very poor, and where my dad worked, he could get hot dog buns, and Coney sauce really cheap. And so there was a period in our time where we had Coney dogs almost every day for dinner because, we could afford it. But yeah, so I have a fondness for Coney dogs. They're pretty good. I'm not a big chili dog fan though. To be honest,
I like hot dogs. I'm just not a chili person on my hot dog. But
yep, I'm with you on that. Do you do anything on hot dogs, or you like I'm either Coney or nothing for me?
I can do ketchup. I can do mustard if I feel like it, but I'm ketchup, mustard. Not really a big relish guy, but best hot dogs ever at the ballpark. Always, you always need to get a nice hot dog at the ball game.
Okay. Let's go to the next question from Caleb Collins. Thoughts on college football rule change possibilities? So, Ryan, I'm trying to find these four things. I'm going to pull up Ross Dellinger's Twitter page here real quick, just so I can give them specifically what the rule changes are.
Are there new ones? I didn't even see this.
Yeah, it's about time, length of gameplay. I'm going to pull it up here. Just give me a second here. I'll have it here in the folks. Okay, here it is. Number one is prohibiting consecutive timeouts regarding icing kicks. So we'll just take these one by one. That one I'm fully on board with. I don't think you should be able to call consecutive timeouts. I don't. I hate that in basketball. I hate that in football. Right? I think a play has to happen before you can call your next timeout. That's what I believe. So I don't think you should do that. I'm very much be a supporter of that. Ryan, thoughts on that one? Looked like you kind of didn't really have an opinion on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really thought about it. I mean, yeah, it's annoying, especially to me watching a football game. Like it's just seems like monotonous. Just time wasted, and you know what I mean. So
it's annoying, but it's also, practically speaking, I just feel like you get a chance to call timeout. You see what the other team is doing. You call timeout. You go back out there, and you shouldn't be able to use the timeout again. You should have to run another play before you call timeout. That's what I just think that should be.
I mean, if anything,
whether it's icing a kicker or any situation.
Yeah, only the opposition should be able to call another timeout if they wanted to. Right. Like if it's a matching up to a different look or whatever it is. Right. Yeah, agree.
No untimed down at the end of the first quarter or third quarter. That's fine. I mean, okay.
Why is that?
Whatever. So basically, it's just about length of games and length of plays is what they're trying to do. So if you have a penalty at the end of the first quarter, you replay the down, it's untimed. That's fine. Whatever. I mean, you don't have an untimed down and there's 5 minutes left. So I would say go start the second quarter, and that play happens in the second quarter. I'm fine with that. That's not a big deal to me. So 2 I can run with. The next 2 I don't like.
Okay.
Number 3 is the clock runs after first downs except inside of 2 minutes and a half. So basically going to the NFL rule for the most part. So I personally hate that rule. What kills me is the complaint is the length of games. Now they're using the whole, we want to limit the number of plays for safety. Bullcrap. If you cared about safety, there's a million different rules you do differently, right? So don't talk to me about it. It's about length of games and too many games spilling over into the slots of the next game. That's what it boils down to for me.
Yeah.
You want to do that, then here's a thought. Here's a crazy, crazy idea. Start games on time. So if it's a 2 o'clock game, start it at 2 o'clock, or maybe cut it up 5 minutes. Instead of kicking off at 2:06, started at 2:02 or something like that, right? And number 1. Number 2, I don't know, maybe cut a commercial or 2 out during the course of games, right? So don't tell me it's about, so here's my question. And people say, oh, games less. Why do people who supposedly love a sport advocate for rules where we see less of the sport? Are you going to lower ticket prices if you're cutting down the number of plays that are played in the game? The games are going shorter. Are you going to lower ticket prices if I'm going to see less of the game? I don't think so, right? Division II and Division III games have the same rules as Division I. Why don't those games last as long? Because we have normal halftimes, we kick off on time, and we don't have commercial breaks. So how about you limit a couple commercial breaks per half? How about that? Or limit the length of commercial breaks. How about that? Why are those never the proposals if it's about the quality of the game? Because it's not about the quality of the game. It's about money. And that's what drives me nuts. So no, I don't. This isn't the freaking NFL, right? Well, I don't. And this thing, why are people so dead set on making college football just like the NFL? If you like the NFL, freaking watch the NFL. Stop trying to make college football the NFL. It's different, right? So, and for most of these kids, 90-some% of college football kids, this is the last chance they have to play football ever. Why are we trying to take more of that away from them? It's not about player safety. It's about money.
Did you see
that's my issue with it.
Did you see the new rule that was in the USFL, I think, or it was in the XFL? Did you see the new kickoff rule they have in the XFL?
No, I didn't. What is it?
So the kicker is at regular depth, the returner is at the regular depth, but then all the special teams players on both sides, I think, are on like the 30-yard line, like at the closer to where the returner is, and they're all like locked up basically one-on-one in like a fitted position. And so the kicker kicks off, when the returner starts returning the football, the guys are all locked up and they're not allowed to disengage and try to go after the ball carrier until after the returner starts after he receives the football. So they're all in like a fitted position type of thing. I think that is for safety, which is a good thing, but I don't know how I feel about it yet. I need to see it more honestly, but I mean, they're trying to eliminate the running 70 yards full speed and massive collision type of thing. You know what I mean?
I get that. I get that. But see, I return kick. I was on kick return team in college. I never had a hit where I was like, oh my God, that was just the worst hit I've ever taken. Yeah. Right. Like I just, I think they look worse than they are. Look, they've gotten rid of there were some things on kick returns that to me needed to go, like the wedge. Because the only way you can bust up a wedge is by literally sacrificing your body at the kickoff gods to get it done. Like, that's fine. But, I think a lot of stuff is we're still tinkering with it too much. I mean, it's at this point in time, just freaking get rid of kickoffs then. Like, I don't like that because I think those have an impact of the game. But I think there's plenty of other things they could do to change the rules than that. I'd have to honestly, I'd have to see it, Ryan. I think in my head, I don't like it. But if I saw it, I may be like, oh, you know what? Like, practically, I kind of like that. It makes a lot of sense.
I think practically from a safety perspective, it makes sense. But there's also like the purist in me that's like, that's not how it's supposed to be played,
I'm all for changing rules as long as you stay to the traditional aspects of the game. Like, to me, traditionally, the wedge was a big part of kick returns. I'm okay getting rid of that because there's nothing else in football that's like that, right? And, okay, yeah, there's nothing else football. You run 70 yards. I get all that. But number one, you don't run 70 yards because that means you'd be tackling the guy at the goal line.
Yeah.
And you're usually weaving in and out of people anyway. So it's not like a full dead sprint. But I get the principle. I'd have to see it, Ryan, before I make too harsh of a judgment on it. Honestly, I'd really have to see it.
I used to love running down and kickoff. I think that's why I'm a little fired up about it.
Yeah, I get that. All right, here we go. So that's 3. And then the last rule was clocks run on incompletions once the ball is spotted.
I don't think I like that.
Yeah.
I don't think I like it. It's a dead ball, right? Like nothing happened. You didn't advance or anything. You didn't lose yardage. You didn't advance yardage. Like why is the clock running?
What's the rule in the NFL on an incompletion?
As far as what, if the clock stops?
Yeah. Does it start once they spot the ball?
No, not that I'm
So this would be a rule that no other sport does. Like no other level of football does it that way.
I've never seen that.
Shortened games, it's stupid.
Never seen that before. Never seen that before. Yeah, I mean, why? I just don't understand why the clock's starting.
You're making the first down. You're making incomplete rule the same as a first down rule, which is dumb to me.
Wait, so my question though would be: so in that situation, if I'm running an offense where it's like less than like a minute left in the game, and I'm trying to get in position, a quarterback can't throw the ball away because the clock would keep running. Is that true? Is that what I'm getting at?
It would keep running once the ball's spotted.
So if I'm a quarterback, I need to chuck that thing out because
they're just throwing a new football. You know what I mean?
That's so dumb, man. I hate that. Agreed. I hate that.
Plus, you got a guy running 40 yards down the field. Now he's got to sprint back, or you've got to force him to come off the field, which some teams do anyway. But yeah, I don't.
Colin just said something in the chat that what if they spike the football? Is that the clock still runs?
It stops until they've spotted it.
I hate that. I hate that so much. Yeah, I don't like that at all.
But to Colin's point on the spike is if you spike the ball with 1 second left, you almost have zero chance of getting the ball snapped.
Yeah, you wouldn't even spike it anymore. It wouldn't make any sense for you. Yeah.
Right. I think it's dumb.
That's really dumb. That's the worst one, I think. That's really dumb.
Do they even have football people as part of these rules? Like, I swear to God, it drives me nuts, Ryan. Oh my gosh. I shouldn't swear to God, but I'm just so annoyed with everything that they do.
So the only way you can stop the clock is if you take a timeout. That's the only way you can stop the clock.
To completely stop the clock where it doesn't start again until the ball snapped? Yes, take a timeout.
Oh, I hate that. I hate that so much. I hate that so much.
Yeah. So dumb. All right, let's get to some more questions here. Brian from Beefeater, a.k.a. the old school toe jam. With all the linebacker talent we have, what do you do with Maris Liufau? Love the kid, but seeing him lost or getting eaten up by linemen last year may keep him off the field, I think.
This is a big year for Maris Liufau. It's a big spring. It's a big fall. I mean, at the end of the day, Beefeater, like last year was not good enough. We know it wasn't good enough. I mean, it was not. Maris was not good last year. And I think Maris would also tell you that he wasn't good last year. I think that he's a smart kid, right? So this is a big year because, like you just said, there's a lot of talent coming up through the pipe, man. And if you do not hit somewhere near your potential or at least become a consistent football player this year, you're going to get passed up pretty quick, I would think. You would have to because, look, I know that there's some stubbornness to maybe play a younger player at linebacker from what we saw last year. Maybe. I don't know. But all I'm saying is, like, Al Golden at the end of the day is a smart guy. He's a smart coach. He is. And I'd be very disappointed if he just was like, oh, no, that's fine. Same thing as last year. Cool. Let's just stick with that. Like, at some point, man, it's like, okay, Maris, you had the year to get back into playing shape and to get back to where you were before the injury, all that great stuff, man. But if you're doing that same stuff in year 2 as a starter, then maybe you're just that guy. Like maybe that's just who you are, right? So this is a make it or break it year for Maris Liufau. It's a make it or break it off season for Maris Liufau more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Agree. He if he doesn't step up and play better, he's got to have a more niche role. That's it. Yeah. Where it's his job and he just goes and does it.
Maybe a part-time Viper or something. Yeah, right.
Yep. Brian Hockney says, "Who is your favorite preferred walk-on that Notre Dame signed?" It's easy, that for me, and they signed some really good walk-ons. It's Luke Talich for me. I mean,
yep.
Luke Talich is a good football player.
That's it, man. He's out of the state of Wyoming, 6'3", 185 pounds. Talked about it a bunch already, but he said he had multiple scholarship offers to play Pac-12 football. just grew up a Notre Dame fan. Just all came down to. So the opportunity as a preferred walk-on meant more to him than playing at Utah or playing at Washington State or whatever. I mean, that kid is a really physical kid. I think that he has some incredible instincts and good short area explosiveness. Could he stay at safety long term? It's possible, but I think eventually, as that kid hits a weight room and hits the college strength program, that's a rover, man. And that's a really good one, too. That's a really good one, potentially.
Yep.
I would be surprised. I'll put it like this. If Luke is a part of the Notre Dame program for 4 to 5 years, I'd be surprised if he's not a scholarship player relatively early in his career. I'm not saying like year one.
I'll see you one better. I'll be shocked if he's not in the rotation at some point in time in his career. Like he's like not like I'm the number 2 guy on the depth chart, but I don't ever play. Like not that kind of number 2, but like number 2 where like this guy's playing. Like,
Looks good, man.
Football player.
He's a good player.
I have a question, Ryan. Something Larry Friedel brought up. He said, like the Marino fake spike. I have a question for you.
Yes.
I've always had this thought. I've never liked the fake spike. I've never thought that should be a legal play. And
Why?
a perfect. I'm gonna explain because it's a good question. It's a lot like that Kenny Pickett play a couple years ago, where when a quarterback spikes the ball, you can't come in and hit him. You can't tackle him. You're not allowed to. I mean, there's things you can't do because it's a spike. You have to let it play. It's like when a quarterback slides, you can't hit him. And you remember, was it the bowl game or was the ACC championship game against Wake Forest? When Kenny Pickett's running and he fake slides and then they stop because they can't hit him, and then he keeps running. Like you're faking something that the other team is by rule not allowed to do something to you, right? Like if a quarterback takes a step back and he's going to spike it or take a knee or something, right? Like you can't go hit him. You can't hit him after he spikes. You get called for a penalty. You have to stop and, spikes it and the play's over. So anytime you're faking something that changes the rules where you can't do this if a guy does that, I don't think you should be allowed to fake that. So now they've since changed the rule. You can't do what Kenny Pickett did. You can't fake a slide and then go.
Yeah.
So to me, it's similar vein. I've always felt that way about the fake. Now, it worked great for Marino, right? I think it was against the Jets, but I've never liked that rule. I mean, great for him. It was the rule, but if it was up to me, the rule would be you can't simulate a spike and then do it. Now, if you want to simulate a spike formationally, fine. But the quarterback, it's the act of the quarterback simulating a spike in any type of way is the issue for me. That's my take on that.
So if they line up in a spike laden formation and then Marino just drops back without the motion of the fake spike,
totally fine with that.
Okay.
If he turned around and tossed it to the guy playing deep, totally fine with that. You can't simulate the action of a fake snap. That's like a spike, I should say. You can't like come back. You can't like fake taking a knee and then get up and throw. You're simulating the act that would kill the play. Then I think that should be it. Right now, if you drop back on they think you're going to take a knee and you're just dropping back, and you throw it, totally fine, because you're not simulating that you're taking a knee. Same thing with the spike. So that would be my stance on that. Like Derek Calmer says, you can't fake something designed to protect you, and that's kind of the principle of the rule. So.
Well, luckily, apparently a spike is not going to be a thing very shortly, so we don't have to worry.
I know,
about
right?
It
yeah. Spike it, pick the ball up, and chuck it 60 yards.
Seriously.
And I would say if you're going to do that, then stop. Then you can't. Here's the thing. The only way that I would be okay with that is if you're going to say, hey, you can't switch balls during a series. Because literally they would just throw a new ball in from the sideline. You'd have that thing set in 5 seconds. Like that's just it doesn't. Here's the deal. You could not do what TCU did at the end of the game to beat Baylor this year. Spike the ball, run that team off, run the field goal team on, and get the kick. Yeah. We need to save that 3 seconds. Really? Really? So yeah, I didn't love that one.
I especially hate when it becomes a deterrence, especially during the biggest moments of a football game too, right? I could care less about time at that point when you're hurting a team that's trying to win a football game, man. They're trying to drive down to win a football game, and then all of a sudden the only way that they can stop the clock is with the timeout. That's the only way. I guess you go out of bounds, but still.
Yeah, it's absurd.
Yeah.
Fullback Dive has a question, Ryan. He says, would it be easier for Sullivan Absher to move to tackle after starting at guard and getting some experience, or better to play tackle from the beginning if that was where he was going to end up?
I mean, it's always easier to go from tackle to guard than guard to tackle. I mean, that's guard to tackle is just not a transition that happens. Like, it just doesn't happen. I mean, I think of Braden Smith that played guard at Auburn and then transitioned to right tackle for the Indianapolis Colts. Like, that's really one of the lone outliers. Like, it doesn't happen because it's difficult to play offensive tackle, right? Like, if Sullivan Absher is an offensive tackle, he needs to play offensive tackle and just play offensive tackle. Like, you need to stick him there. I'm not playing him at guard with the idea that, but eventually he'll be a tackle, right? You know what I mean? Because, I mean, that's like more like there's more trajectory of like, I'm trying to figure out how to say this the best. Like, Charles Jagasaw is a guy, right? Charles Jagasaw is going to play tackle at Notre Dame more than likely. But could he play guard early on in his career to get him on the field? Yes. But from a development side, if you think that Sullivan Absher is a tackle, he has to play tackle because he is not used to the nuances of playing offensive tackle. That's important for his development that he needs. So if he's a tackle, stick him at tackle. He can't play guard as a freshman because Sullivan Absher needs those reps if you think he's a tackle. He needs to play out in the islands.
Because to this question, it is easier to move a guy inside to guard than it is vice versa.
Yes.
And Ryan, you nailed the exception too. The exception would be is if you think Sullivan Absher can start for you as a freshman at guard and then maybe kick out, because then you're doing it. If you have a whole off season, you're doing it then. So yes, I agree completely with what Ryan said. If you think a guy has a shot to play tackle, you start him at tackle and see what he can do. And then kind of go from there. Like, so what I said earlier was if the new O-line coach doesn't see him as a tackle, then make the move and do that. But that would be the thing.
I almost wish that's what's going to happen for Sullivan, man. Because again, I think if he just sticks to guard and he just develops there, I think he could be a really good guard, man. I really do. Yeah.
Let's go to the next question from Bailey Brad. I think it's a fair question. I don't agree with it, but I think it's a fair question. He says, doesn't Marcus Freeman get some blame for linebacker recruiting? I'm a Freeman defender, but that should be his bread and butter. I understand where you're coming from. But the fact of the matter is number one, he said, I'm the lead recruiter for everyone, which A, is not practical, but B, does mean his time is spread much more thin. And look, you can't, if you're going to spend the time needed on linebacker specifically to overcome failures of your current staff, then it's going to then suffer in other positions. You can't be that guy, in my opinion. So no, I don't think he deserves the blame from a operational standpoint. For me, where I would say, hey, coach, this is where my criticism would be is why aren't you either A, making a change at linebacker, or B, doing more to make sure that your defensive coordinator is doing what he needs to do from a work standpoint, and then also making sure that he's coordinating more with your recruiting coordinator to make sure that they're all on the same page. I'm not saying that's not happening. I'm saying those are the things that I would do. Are those two things. I think it's about him that's where he needs to be more active is, hey, Al, freaking do what you need to do, man. I'm out here trying to help Mick with corners. I'm trying to help O'Leary with safeties. I'm trying to help Al with D linemen. I'm trying to help Chancey with receivers. I'm trying to help, Gino with quarterbacks. I'm trying to help, dealing with right. I can't also be the primary linebacker recruiter.
It's not his job to babysit. It's not his job to babysit, to your point. Yeah.
Right. All right, here we go. From Brandon Plesner, he says, I'm worried about them settling for guys on the D-line instead of pushing for some others they've offered. I share your sentiment.
I get that.
Where Brandon and I would disagree is I don't view Bryce Young as being one of the guys that they would be selling for. I don't. But that's a different conversation. But I do get concerned that they're going back to the Brian Kelly way of recruiting, which is just taking some of the easier wins as opposed to really battling for some of the better players.
Sure.
Anthony Manzano has a question for you, Ryan. Once Sam Hartman leaves after the 24 season, who is the future quarterback at Notre Dame? This is coming from both a Hurricanes and Irish fan.
I mean, I think that the easy one is if it goes the way that it could. I mean, I think that there's a possibility that Tyler Buckner's that guy. If he buys in and he is settled to being the future of the program and learns a year maybe with Sam Hartman and battles with them and makes himself better day in and day out, I still think Tyler Buckner could be that guy. If Tyler chooses that's not a situation he wants to be in, then I mean, your mind then goes to Kenny Minchie as a redshirt freshman in 2024. Maybe CJ Clark comes in and he battles as a true freshman. Like that's when the next wave happens as far as like what the future of the quarterback position is. But I think the immediate return is Tyler Buckner still has that upside to be the guy for Notre Dame in 2024 and beyond.
Agree completely. All right, next question from Jimmy McGill. Does the offensive coordinator have to coach a position, or can you coach for each position? Can you have a coach for each position and then a separate OC? You can, but you're going to have to take away from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that means you got to fire Brian Mason. You have to have somebody teaching two positions. Like maybe you have an O-line tight ends coach. He does both. Maybe you have here's an option is you hire a really good GA that works with the tight ends during individual drills, but the receivers coach is involved in the pass game part. The O-line coach's part is involved in the run blocking part. You could do something like that, but I think in some offenses, in Notre Dame's offense, the tight ends coach needs a coach. Here's the uniqueness of offensive versus defensive coaching. It's same 11 guys, but the positions are broken down more, in my opinion, on offense. It's quarterback, running back, receivers, tight ends, O-line. And some you could even say, O-line, tackles, tight ends, guard, centers, but it's still two guys for tight end and offensive line in some capacity. On defense, it's D-line, linebackers, corners, safeties. I mean, it's 4 versus 5. So to me, I do believe in most offenses, you need a tight end specifics coach. There's some you could get away with it, Ryan, but not in a pro-style team system like Notre Dame's. So if you have, let's just say hypothetically that like Tyler Eifert decided he wanted to get back into coaching and you were able to bring him in as a GA, okay, cool. Yeah, all right.
Could you imagine that?
You know what I mean? Like you trust that he'd be able to do to a certain degree. He'd be able to coach that position with help from the O-line receivers coach and Gerad Parker, right?
Sure.
If you gave me a GA like that or a really smart up and coming young coach that you could get for a GA, then I'm cool with that. Like Mike Elko did this with Tyler Santucci, who's now his defensive coordinator at Duke. He was a GA, I believe, in 2017, but he coached the Rovers. Now, Clark Lee had oversight and all that, but he was coaching the Rovers. He would take the Rovers during drills. Nick Lazinski would do things like that when he was a GA. So if you get like a really talented GA, you can get away with him doing more, but none of those guys were like full-time, I have a position all to myself, like you'd have to have with the GA, right? So even though Tyler Santucci was the Rovers coach, he still had Clark Lee as the linebackers coach that was like there to help and lead and direct. He wasn't right. It wasn't a completely separate position the way the tight end is. So, but if you get a guy like that and you want to give him more responsibility, I'm cool with that. You have to make sure he's good enough to do that.
Yep.
Here's a question from Ian Johnson. Do you think Ian Book's inability to read a defense taught Reese that he had to look for the perfect play? No, because he didn't really start doing that till this year. They've always done some version of the scan, but like Jack Cohn was very good at reading defenses, and they still did that with him. Right. That was just more about Tommy Reese being a coach whose philosophy, and this isn't right or wrong. It is what it is. It's a different philosophy. I'm more of I want to develop schemes that allow us to have options depending on what they do. That's how I am. Because that allows me to have less volume. It also allows me to go a little quicker. It allows me to get into more of a rhythm as it goes. Line up, stop, look, come back, get the ball play set with 5 seconds left, and then quickly get your side adjustments and all that within 5 seconds. I just personally don't like that. Other coaches do that. It's a philosophy thing. I want to be in the perfect play. But that has to require greater volume of concepts to be effective, be able to effectively do that, which is another reason I don't like it, to be completely honest with you. And NFL teams do that a lot. It's just the difference is in the NFL, what's the moment that the thing goes off? The ear thing goes off?
I think it's like 15 seconds or something, 20 seconds.
Right. So to a degree, you can kind of do that in the NFL, right? Because you can talk to them, to a degree, but it's just a philosophy thing to me.
That's what the Rams did when Jared Goff was the quarterback and Sean McVay was the head coach, that they would get up to the line very quickly to get set so that Sean McVay was not only setting the play, he was also telling Jared, throw here in this situation type of thing, trying to cheat the system a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. Ant VR has a mailbag question. He says the spread for the Ohio State versus Notre Dame game is currently Ohio State -8. If you had to bet it today, who would you be taking? That's an easy one for me. I'm taking Notre Dame.
Give me the points, man. Give me the
Yes.
points.
Absolutely
Yes, sir.
taking Notre Dame. You got a super chat here from Shaquille Oatmeal. This is freaking hilarious. Oatmeal or grits?
I have never had grits, actually. In theory, I think I would love grits. I mean, it's just cornmeal, right? Basically, is kind of the whole premise of it.
Yep.
But I mean, I'm a big oatmeal guy. Eat oatmeal almost every morning, so
If
I guess
you're
I have to defer.
Ryan, of
Yes.
grits, you can always watch My Cousin Vinny. They have a very good
Right.
exposition on the proper method of cooking grits, and
Yes.
no self-respecting Southerner has
Cooks
instant
it and
grits.
grits.
That's
Yes,
right.
I know. I've
That's
seen
right.
it, man. I've seen it.
I'm proud of you, Ryan. I'm proud of you. I'm
Yes.
very proud that you've watched that movie very much. I'm an oatmeal guy.
Are you telling me that in your kitchen a grit soaks up the liquid faster than anybody else's kitchen
to exist on your stove?
Yes. Yes.
I'm a fast cook, I guess. Oh man, I love that movie. I watched that movie I've watched that movie at least 20, 25 times, and I laugh every single time I watch that movie. It is so hilarious. Love that.
I made Caitlin watch that like a couple years ago. She had never seen it. It's such a good movie, man. It's really good.
That's how Blazing Saddles was for me. Yeah. I didn't watch that until I was in my 20s because it was my dad's favorite movie. He liked Westerns. My granddad liked Westerns. His dad liked Westerns. Like, we'd go over there. He'd be watching like some John, and I've just never been a Westerns guy. Like, there's a couple Clint Eastwood Westerns that were okay. So I'm like, the last thing I want to do is watch a Western comedy. You know what I mean? Like no thanks. But he's it's so funny. It's so funny. It's so funny. And Mel Brooks did it. And I remember watching Spaceballs, and I thought Spaceballs was one of the stupidest movies ever. Like, I thought it was so dumb. I did not enjoy it at all.
Yeah.
So I was like, I won't like it. And I didn't watch those in my 20s. Like, this is like one of the funniest movies I've ever seen in my entire life. It was great. It was absolutely great.
Did you see what Jay Wick just said? Utes.
Utes.
Remember,
what did you call him? A Ute? Yeah,
Utes.
Sorry, the Youths. Yes, great movie. Great movie.
Fantastic.
Great movie.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Did you say what? Did you say Ute? Yeah, Ute. What's a Ute?
And then his wife, you're gonna shoot a poor innocent little deer.
Yeah, just a little sipping from the brook. Bam! Now, would you care what the color of the pants the shot you was wearing? She was great in that movie, by the way.
She was
Marissa
awesome,
Tomei. She was amazing in that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we could literally do a whole show on just quoting My Cousin Vinny. It's just great.
It's incredible.
It's absolutely great. All right. So next, we have two more left here. Archer452 says, what is the arm length and explosiveness difference between Ian Moore and Gilby Lambert? Lambert is listed at 6'6", 280, and Moore is at 6'5", 295.
I think the biggest difference between the two is lateral mobility. Like, I think that Ian Moore is just a little bit tight, man. Like, I just don't think he moves laterally incredibly well. Well, I think Gilby Lambert does that exceptionally well. Like, he is just an easy mover. I don't have the arm length on either one of those players, but I mean, I would think that Lambert's longer than Ian Moore. But I mean, that again, it's not really
definitely appears to be on film, no question.
Yeah. I don't think that I don't even think it's really an Ian Moore like body composition thing that's like he's not a tackle for me. It's literally I just think he's tight, man. I just think he's tight, and I think he's better in condensed spaces. That's all. I think he can be really good in that role.
Mover. I think he's more Tommy Kramer than he is Liam Eichenberg. Right now, Tommy Kramer had longer arms than Liam Eichenberg, but Tommy was a guard. Liam was a tackle. So there's a lot more things that go into that than just. I believe Tommy had longer arms than. Now that I say that, I'm like, okay, let me just go look here real quick.
Tommy definitely did. He definitely did.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that
short arms. Liam had short arms.
Yeah, very short arms. Yeah. Tommy Kramer had 33.5-inch arms. So
Liam's were like 32 and something, like 32 3/8 or something.
Right. Yes. So I'm just gonna pull that up here real quick. So if you look at a lot of different parts about them, the 32 and 3/8, 6'5", 302. You know, Tommy was 6'5", 317. Not a huge difference. It's very similar in the dimensions that you're mentioning, Archer, but Liam moved like a tackle. And he had the athleticism of a tackle. He was more comfortable in space. Ian Moore's not a guy that to me looks necessarily overly great in space. Again, this isn't to say that Ian Moore's not a good football player. I don't think he's a top 100 guy, He's definitely top 200 guy, top 150, 200 guy for sure. It's just they don't need more guards. And if they're going to get a guard, they need a guy that's just a butt kicker. And to me, I don't know that he is that type of thing. Here's one. This is from our resident LSU fan, I guess. And we have two. Now we have Frank McCatry is also LSU fan. And then Insured by Big says, as the lone nice LSU fan here, we actually have two, my friend. So that's very nice. I think you might be the only two on the planet, as far as I can tell so far, here that keeps up with all the IB content. The clouds have parted, and Kelly is taking Pullian off the field from coaching. Thanks, guys, for the great content. Honestly, it was actually a really smart move by Kelly, because Brian Pullian brings a lot of value in the role he's being assigned to. It's the only role I think he brings value. Somewhat recruiting, but personnel, putting a team together, all that kind of stuff. Brian Pullian doesn't relate well to kids. They just don't respect him. And he's a mediocre coach, in my opinion. Personnel-wise, I think Brian Pullian could bring a lot of value as long as he is a team player and isn't, so if he's not in a recruiting role, he has to bring in X number of kids. I think he'd be more of a team player. So I think he brings a lot more value to that, because as we told y'all last year, Brian Pullian is not a very good special teams coach.
Yeah.
And LSU fans saw that firsthand in about every big game they played. They had a huge special teams mistakes against Florida State. Their special teams against Tennessee, I don't know what the heck they were doing. They gave up a touchdown on special teams against Georgia in the SEC title game. You remember that on the blocked field goal? So, yeah. But
according to a LSU podcaster that had you on a podcast, he's a really good special teams coach.
One of the
best.
Look
at his resume.
One of the best. Unbelievable. Anyway, so that was always a bit of a ridiculous one, Ryan. So and here we go. I want to say there was one more question that Archer452 says, looking at the week 1 schedule for the upcoming season, I can't remember an opening week with fewer quality matchups. Will TV networks start requiring a certain number of better games weekly? That's a really good question, Ryan, because like this past year, I thought we had some great week 1 and week 2 matchups. Like week 1 this year was excellent, I thought. I mean, you had Notre Dame and Ohio State. You had West Virginia Pitt on that Thursday before. You had Oregon, Georgia. You had Utah, Florida.
Yeah.
There was like one Cincinnati, Arkansas, and then Clemson, Georgia Tech played that Monday. So there were some really good opening weekend games. Now, as far as this upcoming season for 2024, I don't know that I could point to a lot of those really good games, Ryan. Now that I'm kind of thinking about it, looking through it, I can't really think of a ton of great opening weekend games. I don't think they'll do anything about it, honestly. I don't. The reality is most people in week 1 are going to watch no matter what, because it's your first chance to see your team play.
True.
So whether you're playing Georgia or whether you're playing Georgia State, you're going to watch most likely. The teams that make money anyway are going to do that. And teams are going to care more about, oh, hey, we're trying to get to the playoff now, 12-team playoff and all that kind of stuff. So I wish they would do more to do those type of things. I do. I wish they would do more to try to incentivize more of the big game out of conference games. Like I wish conferences would do more to do that. But the reality is even then it's hard, Ryan. Like remember when Notre Dame started with Florida State in 2021?
Yep.
You're looking at this, and if you just looked at this game a decade ago, you're like, holy moly, you're starting at Florida State. You're going to play Wisconsin in the first month of the season. You got to play at Florida State and Wisconsin. Like, man, and you got to play Toledo. Because remember, 10 years ago, Toledo's pretty flip a good MAC team, right? And then you fast forward to 2021, and none of those teams were good, right? And so it's like, it's really hard to guarantee that you're going to get good games because you just don't know how good teams are going to be from year to year. I think you have to at least try to schedule that, right? Like when Alabama played Florida State at the beginning of what year was it? They played Florida, was it 2019, 18, 17, somewhere, one of those years. Alabama played Florida State, and it ended up not being a very good win for them because Florida State ended up just not being very good. And, you look at it and say, but I don't really fault them as 17. I don't fault them for that, because when you schedule that game, like Florida State's like 4 years removed from a national championship, right? I mean, they were pretty good coming into that year. Now, that year, Florida State, that's when they started their descent. They went 7-6. But in 2016, they were 10-3. In 2015, they were 10-3. In 2014, they were 13-1. And in 2013, they were national champs. Right. So how could they have predicted that that's the year that they were going to go into the crapper, right? So to me, there's intent. Did you schedule this game with the intent of it being a challenge? Michigan last year had zero intent of being challenged out of conference. Zero. Washington playing Michigan State out of conference ended up not being a very big win, but the intent was there.
Yeah.
Right. And so that to me matters to me. I wish they would demand more of that, to be completely honest with you. I do.
I guess
people, or go to 10 conference games, one of the two.
Yeah. People would probably think it's dumb for me to say something like this, but I do think it's like a really good initial peek into the season, right? If you have some of those matchups, it's like your first impression on a season, right? And I know it's not a person-to-person meeting, but like that does matter to me of like, what's the season getting kicked off with, man? Like, what are we looking forward to? Like the excitement level. I think it does matter. I do.
We have a question here from Edward Cheatham. Edward asks, do you think that the transfer portal will allow NCAA coaches coming from the NFL to make up for their lack of high school recruiting experience due to experienced transfers valuing NFL experience more? I think there's merit to that, because if you're coming from the NFL and let's say you're a coordinator or a head coach, you're coming with some buzz. And you're coming with, dude, this is an NFL guy. This guy did such and such. Like, let's just say hypothetically, Sean McVay was like, I'm sick of the NFL. I'm sick of dealing with these kids and these mega contracts. Although now it's not as important because you're getting contracts in college anyway. Let's say hypothetically, Sean McVay was like, dude, I want to coach in college, right? I want to coach in college. And he gets a college job. He's going to be able to hit the portal hard because he's got a Super Bowl ring. He was an NFL head coach who did A, B, C, and D. You're going to be like, dude, I want to go play. This guy knows what it takes. He's going to play in a pro style system, blah, 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 blah. He would do very well in the transfer portal, in my opinion,
for sure.
Right away.
Sure.
Which, to Edward's point, would then help the fact that I got to learn this whole high school thing a little bit, right? Because the transfer portal is much closer to NFL free agency than high school recruiting is, in my opinion.
Yep.
And so there's a more limited timeline, right? It all happens in a shorter period of time. The pitches are, here's what I can offer you. It's not like that year and a half building a relationship that, like, if you talk to high school NFL guys as early as you talk to high school kids, you're tampering. You lose draft picks and find millions of dollars. So I think the portal would be much more right up in your wheelhouse of, hey, we got a month to go out there and get this sucker signed, which is exactly what NFL free agency is. Like, if you don't get a big time guy signed in the first couple of weeks of NFL free agency, you're kind of screwed. You know what I mean? Like, there's a couple guys here and there, but you're just hoping some veteran gets cut. Or you're in the portal. Well, let's see what happens after minicamp. Maybe somebody's got to cut a guy as a casualty cap and we go get him then. But like, that stuff happens quick, Ryan. Like, you look at NFL free agency, man, those guys are signing like nonstop, like a couple weeks. Am I correct in the time frame? It's about a week or two, and most of the big name guys are signed.
I mean, right, first couple weeks, most of the guys are signed. Honestly,
that's much more close to what the portal is, in my opinion. So that's a great observation, Edward. I think that is absolutely something you could see if NFL guys wanted to come down as coordinators or as head coaches. I think that absolutely be something that'd be beneficial. No question about it. So good observation on that one. Well, Ryan, that's going to do it for today's show. Really good show. Great stuff. We'll kind of continue to get better and better and better about how this format's going to go. But I really like this format where we just hit on a bunch of different topics. We won't do it every day because sometimes we have a hard enough time coming up with like one interesting topic in the off season. We're not going to come up with like 4 or 5 every day. But I do like this Wednesday show. If you guys have topics you want us to discuss, put it on the message board. That's actually something we should do, Ryan. Is every weekend say, hey, what do you guys want to discuss this Wednesday? Now, sometimes we'll have topics we need to discuss, but there may be something interesting that a lot of you want to discuss. So if you're on the premium message board, go ahead and do that, and we'll get into it. We'll get into it. So, Ryan, thank you for being on the show today. Glad that you're back after getting yesterday off. I want to remind y'all again, if you have the means, number one, step up and help out Jade Mickey's mother. She has stage 4 colon cancer. The family has to relocate to a different state in order to be where the treatment facility is to do that. I would really appreciate that very, very much. We have that on our Twitter page. I'm going to put another link to it now in the chat below, so you'll have that there. Give me a second to pull that one up again so I can put that in there. I'm going to put that in the chat here real quick. So if you're able to do that, if you're able to or not able to, and you're someone who believes in the power of prayer, as I do, I would pray. I would ask you to make sure that you keep Jaden and his family's prayers. Not just Mrs. Mickey and her husband Lamar, who Ryan, you and I have gotten to know a little bit over the last year. Really good guy, great family. Not just them, but also this is a lot for a 19, 20-year-old kid who's a student at Notre Dame, trying to play football, and he's dealing with his mom is fighting for her life. So keep him and the family in your prayers, absolutely. And if you can help out financially, we would appreciate you stepping up and helping out financially. We have given, Irish Breakdown has given, and we would love to be able to help the family continue to do more and more and more to meet the needs that they have. So we would greatly, greatly appreciate that, folks. Hit that like button, everybody. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. And give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate that. And as always, folks, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We're getting closer and closer and closer to 3,000 subscribers. That was our goal for next season. So we wanted to be 1,000 by 2022. We way surpassed that. Our goal was to be to 2020. Yeah, 2022. So, and then, 2,000 by this year, but we're skyrocketing past that. So we've now reset the goal for 3,000 by this year. And so we would like to get there before spring ball starts. So if you've been thinking about signing up, haven't been able to do so now, we would greatly appreciate that. Lots of great conversation going on. Also, if you want to support Irish Breakdown beyond just the normal monthly or annual fee, you can also join one of the booster clubs. You have the Shamrock Club, which is $100 a year. The Blue Club is $150, and the Gold Club is $200. If you sign up in the Shamrock or Blue Club, you also get an IB Club mug. Those only go to Shamrock, Blue, and Gold Club subscribers. Nobody else gets those. They're not available in the IB merch store. If you sign up for the Gold Club, you not only get the mug, but you also get an Irish Breakdown shirt. It'll look like this, but it'll have the green logo on it, and it says IB Gold Club on it. And again, those only go to Gold Club members. I don't have one. Ryan doesn't have one. Vince won't have one. Those are just for Gold Club members. So if you want to sign up and support us, you can do that. Any little bit helps. We appreciate y'all. And of course, more importantly, we're continue to build up that community. So for Ryan, I'm Brian. Everybody have a great, great rest of your day. 6 o'clock tonight, speaking of Vince and Sean will have the midweek mailbag that they will have at 6 o'clock on the IB Nation Sports Talk. Ryan and I will be back tomorrow with more Notre Dame football talk. Thanks for being with us, everybody, today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.